Welcome back to He's a Giant, a pod about all things college football and all things Giants football. I'm your host, Sal, with my co-host, Monty, and our special guest co-host, Justin Penik from Talking Giants. I'm going to start with you, Justin. We can ignore Monty. We've heard his voice enough. Thanks for joining us, man. How are you doing?
Fellas, what's going on? I'm very thankful to be on this show. And I'll tell you right from the start why I'm very happy to be on this show in particular, because I at this point I am such a huge fan of just unique shows. Not just hey another Giants podcast or another sports podcast or whatever, but what you guys do is so niche. I think it's necessary, especially for this time of the year. And man, in a way, because of how disastrous this Giants season was, it was the perfect. It was literally. I was telling Monty this at the tailgate. It was literally the perfect time to start a podcast and a show centered around this, because this is what people are craving. And now, we're post Senior Bowl, Combine will be coming up, and obviously the draft at the end of April. Feels close, but it also feels so far away because there's so much to get done and there's so much to do. This show is absolutely perfect. I listened to some of your Senior Bowl previews on the way down to Mobile, Alabama. The Benadryl that I took disagreed with me, so I may have slept through some of them, but that is none of your faults. That's why I'm really glad to be on this show, because this is such a unique show, and as a creator who I do a couple different things. I'm a fan of just good ideas and unique ideas, and certainly this is one, and I'm really happy to be here.
Yeah, I guess the Giants' loss are our gain in the case of this, but
100%, yeah.
But yeah, man, you're our first guest, Justin. So
no
we're
way.
glad to have it. Yep, you're our first guest, and I couldn't think of a better person, because Justin, I believe you were our first 5-star review. You offered help to us like right away, and we were starting up the show. Like I said, you're in the tailgates. You've offered us, advice and encouragement. So really appreciate you coming on, and appreciate all your help along the way, Justin.
No, thank you, man. Let's rock and roll. I can obviously talk. It's crazy that all the the advice, whatever stuff I have, it's so much not about football. Because there's so much more to running a show and doing this content thing outside of just actually talking football. But I don't want to get into that. Let's talk some ball. Let's talk some Giants.
All right. So what we're going to do for everybody watching and listening is we're going to go through a little bit of the Giants news in this episode, and then we're going to get into some Senior Bowl talk with Justin. So Justin, the big news coming out of Giants land right now is the whole fiasco, and then I guess correction of fiasco with the coaching changes. So we got news today that the Giants promoted, I guess, Mike Kafka to assistant head coach. What do they give Sheraton? Passing game coordinator.
Yep.
And then Jerome Henderson got passing game defensive coordinator. All promotions, I assume they come with some money. And then obviously we just hired Shane Bowen as our defensive coordinator. So let's get your thoughts on whatever part of that you want to hit.
I mean, I'll start off with the titles, and I'll be quick on it. I don't know how much stock I take into it. I'm glad and happy, simply for the sake of, even if it's PR, I'm happy with that. I would be happy. It has to be a pay upgrade, right? It has to be a pay raise. Yeah. So I'm even happy with that, because if you're leaving this season and you're a staff member of the Giants and you're not really thrilled with how Brian Daboll treated you, and you're not thrilled with how Brian Daboll just operates his day to day, if you get a pay increase that results in 3 zeros at the end of it, I think that may make you a little bit more happier, right? It would make me happier. So yeah. That's that to start. The really where it lies for me, and I think Kafka's the most important piece of this, it's the most important part of this, is Kafka should call plays. If Kafka's here, there should be a plan, at least to start the season. And if it doesn't go well, and if Daboll through 4 weeks, 6 weeks, 8 weeks, whatever, says, hey, this isn't going to work, let's take away play calling from you again, and Kafka seems to be a good soldier, unlike, Wink Martindale wasn't really the best of soldiers and not really willing to, bear it out through the season. And then, Wink Martindale could have resigned at the end of the season. No, but he had to, do a whole pouty fest, and the relationship got really toxic. But Kafka seems to be a little bit more of an adult and can take whatever criticism Daboll throws at him. I think at least to start the season, there needs to be an understanding between Daboll and Kafka that Kafka should be calling plays. I think Kafka did enough in 2022 to prove it. And if he's still here and they did not grant that lateral jump, I think Dable should at least grant that to start the season and give Kafka another shot.
I think we both very much agree with you. We've talked about this. I mean, I still I'm happy to have Kafka here, and even increasing other responsibilities to do it with making assistant head coach. That's something you can give to him. But I still hope it comes with play calling. And I'm coming from the exact same spot as you, Justin, where if it is like a make or break season for Dable, and if he decides ultimately he needs to pull that, that's fine. But he's proved enough to get a chance. And one thing I'll add to that. If you're going to pull it, only pull it from it after the game. You know that you're an emotional person in game. No more pulling in-game shit. Make a sound decision after a game that, do I want to pull play calling from this guy? Yes or no. Stop trying to make a decision in-game and just ride it out and see how it plays out, because that's where a lot of his problems has fallen.
Yeah, I agree. I don't know if he's going to be calling plays, man. Like, I feel like maybe I'm reading too much into this, but I feel like the promotion to assistant head coach and then also promoting Tierney makes me feel like they're giving themselves latitude to say, you know what, we might choose to call plays in certain situations or take it away from you, and we want you to be okay with that. So I don't know what's going to happen, but I'm with you. Like, I don't think you should deny Kafka the ability to go and basically run the whole offense in Seattle under Mike McDonald while taking away a critical part of being an OC. But I'll be honest, I think this has Mara and Shane kind of stepping in, written all over it, and saying, mea culpa, we screwed up. Whatever happened with Dable is a screw up, the behavior, and thanks for staying. Please don't leave. Here's some money. Here's some title, So I don't know what they're going to do, but it sure feels like this was an intervention from above. That's how it felt to me when I saw the news.
I'm glad there was. This is the situation where I don't mind if Mara is stepping down, being like, I realize that Mike Kafka is an advantage to the Giants, which I do think. I think Mike Kafka is an advantage to the New York Giants. I mean, you see, especially in 2022, it was really impressive, despite them not being explosive, is how good they were in the red zone. Like they were one of the best, top 6, maybe top 5 teams in the red zone in 2022, and they went from dead last to a top 5 red zone team just in 1 year. And, a lot of us were sitting here saying a lot of it has to do with the play caller and the schematics. And that's, 2022, boom, you kind of proved that. So I think Mike Kafka is an advantage to the Giants. And that is one situation where I am very glad that if John Mara did kind of step down, and Joe Schoen, because I think, Joe Schoen, you have to get the okay from the owner to give out that money, right? Since it's not like a cap situation. So I'm glad that Mara stepped in. It's like, yeah, let's do this. Let's keep these guys in the building. Let's keep these guys happy despite there definitely being turmoil. And it's turmoil that I am definitely worried about heading into year 3 and how it could impact year 3.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
So one other thing I wanted, did you have anything else to say on Kafka, Sal?
No.
So the other thing I want to talk as far as, title change is, Jerome Henderson. He got, a defensive passing game coordinator, and obviously we'll talk about Shane Bowen, but he's a guy that a lot of us thought he had a good shot at getting his defensive coordinator job. Got interviewed for it for the second time. He got passed up. How do we feel about him getting the passing game coordinator? You think this was a little bit of trying to make things right for passing up on the defensive coordinator position?
Bobby and I had a discussion on the last show, and I've been sitting here thinking, especially as the defensive coordinator search got longer and as the top 2 candidates and the top 2 choices got their jobs, and Jerome Henderson is still sitting there, and he's at every day at the Senior Bowl. Like, he was the most engaged. Like, I don't like you saw on the Giants video, they FaceTime Brian Dable. Like, he wasn't even there. Like, he wasn't even in the building. But Jerome Henderson was there every day. So I'm going back and forth thinking, this is the second time that Jerome Henderson has interviewed for the defensive coordinator spot under 2 different coaching staffs now. How is he feeling? Like, what are the feelings and emotions that are kind of running through himself? It's like, I've been here the longest, I deserve this. Or is he kind of like, I don't really want the D coordinator job. I have a pretty stable secondary coach job with the organization that likes me and wants to keep me around, and I'm cool with that. So I wonder where he's kind of at. Maybe this passing game coordinator was an indication that, yeah, he does want that D coordinator job. And Bobby kind of came back at me saying, if you're a position coach, if you're a coach in the NFL, especially like one of these higher level coaches, you want promotions and you want that job. Like you're not in this. You're not in this if you don't want to move up that ladder, which I'm like, yeah, that's also a great point. So it could be seen as that. It could be seen as I'm really interested to know what the passing game coordinator, if it has specific responsibilities, because we know Bowen's very good against the run. And we know that Jerome Henderson has helped shaped a secondary that has sometimes that's been rocky on paper. We know that he shaped a secondary up that's been good enough and that has been average and sometimes even above average, especially thinking back to 2020. So really interested to see what the titles really with Shea Tierney and Henderson, what they actually hold and what they mean, or are they just kind of titles just for these guys to get raises?
Yeah. I think Jerome Henderson is really critical at this point, especially with, and we can segue this in talking about Shane Bowen. Like you mentioned, Bowen's teams have ranked really, really well against the run. Has a lot of stacked boxes, I guess 7+ man boxes very often. And I don't think this is the right pod to go over like the schematics in detail. I was studying a little bit about, creeper blitzes and things that he does. But maybe it's a personnel issue, but his passing game defense wasn't the best. He gave up a lot of explosive plays, tons of yards, not so good between the 20s. And you got to wonder is this something he learned and he's turning to Jerome Henderson and saying, I need you to coach up the DBs to handle what I'm doing here, because I don't know, maybe that's a missing piece for him. And I'm trying to look at the positive here and say maybe that's what's happening.
Yeah, I mean, to add on to what you guys are saying, I mean, my immediate thought before I even saw this defensive passing game coordinator promotion is when we got Shane Bowen, you look at those numbers, I'm like, we need Jerome Henderson more than we've ever needed Jerome Henderson. Like he needs to have a vital part in this defense and coaching up this passing defense. And so I'm glad he got the promotion. And hopefully these two can work well together. But yeah, so what are your thoughts about Shane Bowen, the hire, Justin?
Yeah, I think similar to the Giants, he wasn't our first choice. I would have really liked Bobby Babbage. Like I kind of had, I know people had Denard Wilson as one, and maybe didn't even have Babbage involved at all because he worked with Dable in the past, and that's a bad thing. Even though I didn't necessarily view that as a bad thing, because I wouldn't have minded somebody who worked with Dable in the past with a really good resume that maybe knew what they were getting into. Wink Martindale clearly didn't know what he was getting into, so yeah. I wouldn't have minded, because you have to think about it. Everybody is different from this staff. There's like nobody that has past ties to Dable. At least it's not obvious from their time in Buffalo. So hey, good on Dable for wanting to work with different people, right? But I would have really liked Babbage, and then clearly I think that those were the two. As those two got hired, then Jordan Ronan tweets out, why the defensive coordinator search is taking so long is because the Giants' first two choices were off the board. Well, those were the guys that were hired, the only guys that were hired when Jordan Ronan tweeted that out. So, he kind of put together, the puzzle pieces there. I like Bowen because he has experience, still a younger guy, even Jim Schwartz and Mike Vrabel influence. I mean, there's a rose and a thorn. The rose is that Bowen worked with both of these guys, and you could say that he's influenced by them. The thorn was he really controlled by Vrabel, since apparently he was very involved in the defensive game plan. And then also Jim Schwartz, a lot of what they were doing in 2021 and 2022, it was very Jim Schwartz centered and very Jim Schwartz influenced when he was like the senior defensive analyst or assistant with the Tennessee Titans before he moved on to the Browns this past year. So you can look at it from that rose and thorn. And I guess we'll find out. If he does a good job, then it's like, oh yeah, well, he's influenced by Vrabel and Schwartz. If he does a bad job, then it'll be, oh, well, Vrabel and Schwartz were really had their big hand in that defense. So I guess the results will dictate how we view that.
Yeah. Go ahead, Fasal.
No, I mean, so it's an interesting change in schematics in terms of defensive style, which I found intriguing. So Wink obviously blitzes more than anybody. Mm-hmm. And I think looking at Bowen's numbers the last few years, his blitz rates are in like the bottom 5 of the NFL consistently. He's they call it a 3-4, but if you watch the game film, it's really 4 down linemen, and the fourth down lineman is often outside linebacker. So they rush 4, they twist, they stunt. They call a lot of these creeper blitzes with like the sort of simulated pressure and a linebacker coming in while an end drops into coverage, very Wink-like in that way. But to me, one of the things that I don't know if you got a chance to listen to Big Blue Banter earlier in the week, but Nick Filato pointed out an interesting tidbit that apparently Andre Patterson never worked with Kayvon Thibodeau and Azeez Ojulari under Wink Martindale, that they were exclusively with the Wilkins brothers.
Yeah, that doesn't surprise me because, I mean, that's the D-line and outside linebacker. I mean, especially in Wink's scheme.
Yeah.
I think very, very different assignments and what they're asked to do. So that never surprised me. I was actually interested to hear why, and I'm not, this is not like a slight towards Filato at all. I was surprised to hear how that was like a nugget, because you have Patterson, who is the D-line coach, and they had that specific outside linebacker coach. So I was surprised to hear that. Oh, that was like a takeaway. It's like surprised to hear that they never worked together. That doesn't really shock me.
I guess in theory it doesn't shock me, but when you have what I guess shocked me was when you have a resource like Andre Patterson,
right,
and you're just not putting your best player who kind of overlaps with what he does with him. I was a little surprised. So I'm hoping, I don't know what they're going to do, but I hope one of the reporters asked, is Kayvon Thibodeau now going to do more work with the defensive line group? Is he going to be coached by Andre Patterson? Because if you want to talk about Kayvon Thibodeau's, not his failures, but his shortcomings this year, it's generating consistent pass rush, it's using his hands, getting the bull rushes, using his strength. These are all things that Andre Patterson specializes in. So I'm kind of hoping to see that. I don't know if you guys have thought about that at all, if you've had a chance to discuss it with Bobby or anybody else, but that's something I know Monty and I are big on, using Andre Patterson more.
Monty.
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely something I'm looking forward to and hoping that we get to, because I think Andre Patterson's one of the best coaches in the league. But other thing I wanted to say to this was the interesting thing about the hire of Shane Bowen, like what irked me a little bit was just, it never feels good to get your third choice, and it really kind of feels like they put all their eggs in, the Bobby Babich and Jannard Wilson basket, and they were kind of they wanted to have it done by the end of the week, and when they didn't, it kind of gave off the impression that they were lost and didn't quite know where to go to next. They obviously didn't take too long to make that next decision, which helps a little bit, but it definitely throughout that weekend we're like, what the hell are we doing here? What's going on?
Little observation about Joe Shane. This is like such a nitpick. And actually, you know what? It's not a nitpick. He kind of puts his foot in his mouth.
Yeah, he does.
He did it with Jones. He kind of does sometimes put his foot in his mouth with some stuff. So, and that was one of those. He said, "I expect it to be done." I know the exact phrase of what he said wasn't like it is going to be done, but still, like you don't need to say it, because the second that you say it and then it doesn't happen, then people question it, and that's what we were doing.
Just don't put a date on it. Just say soon. Right. Say it's he puts his foot in his mouth a lot, and he called himself out on it a little bit earlier, if I remember correctly.
He did it with Jones. He said it like I did it. That it's like, yeah, you did, man.
Yeah. So that definitely something worth mentioning, because he did the exact same with Jones. It kind of puts unnecessary pressure on himself.
Mm-hmm.
So the one thing I will say where I was kind of happy with the Shane Bowen hire, it personally, where my view on this whole thing is like, guys like Jannard Wilson and Babich, they excited me. I thought they're really high ceiling defensive coordinators, and they could do some exciting things. But to me, I either wanted to stick with Jerome Henderson because he had a relationship already with all these players and these coaches, and that was a benefit, or I wanted to go with somebody who had play calling experience. I wish we brought in more guys who had play calling experience. I know maybe it wasn't necessarily the best defensive coordinator cycle to get guys like that, but to me, for a guy like Brian Daboll, who already seemed to be well over his head this season in a lot of ways, and is reportedly going to take on a bigger role in this offense, I didn't think bringing in a first-time defensive coordinator was a good move for him. And great. Like maybe Jannard Wilson's going to be one of the best defensive coordinators in the NFL in 3 years from now. Mm-hmm. But are we going to be able to reap those benefits 3 years from now, or if he's hit some struggles early on. So I kind of like bringing in a more established defensive coordinator who just, like you say, he's younger. There is some upside there still, but who, has some experience and is not going to hit as many of those, young rookie play caller struggles.
Yeah, I agree. And, again, the hope there is that the influence of Vrabel and Schwartz, but we'll ignore Schwartz. We'll just say Vrabel because Vrabel's is a defensive coach, right? The influence of Vrabel, because it was reported that he was very involved with the defense. And, there were some Titans fans on Reddit and Twitter saying that there were some that wanted him out. And there were some that, hey, I wouldn't mind if Bowen actually stayed, because it seemed like Vrabel had such a influence on that defense that they would have liked to see Bowen run his own show. So now that's the next step. And that's the question now that he's with the Giants, as Brian Daboll is an offensive coach and he wants to take more ownership over the offense, which I found to be like wild. You're already an offensive coach. You're already communicating with them mostly anyway. That Bowen is now the guy, the sole guy that's running the defense there. And like, I'm with you where I think if we're viewing the defense having a bad year next year, I'm pretty somewhat confident that I don't think we're going to be sitting back saying, man, Shane Bowen just runs a bad defense. And the schematics is why that defense is bad. Because even in Tennessee, they had not great talent. They've always had Simmons, and they've always had guys up front that even when they run with Ford, that they can kind of get to the quarterback right. But the secondary was not very good over there. I actually think the year that they had Jackrabbit, Byard, and Amani Hooker, like those the two safeties, and then they had Jackrabbit at corner. I actually think on paper that's like some of the best secondary that they had, and that was back in 2021, Bowen's first year. So I'm not sitting back if the defense is a disaster next year. I'm not sitting back and saying that Bowen is the reason why. I am saying that Joe Schoen not being able to draft well, that is the thing that I am most concerned about just with this franchise in general, because I am confident in this coach. Even though Brian Daboll's a psychopath, I'm confident with him as a head coach.
Yeah.
I'm confident with him with what he can get out of the quarterback. I'm confident what he can get out of the offense. I'm, as confident with what Wink could get out of the defense. I think they all kind of proved that, but I don't just want good players, like which some of them aren't even very good. I want great players. That is what you watch these teams that are playing in the postseason. They have great players, and it's more than just Dexter Lawrence and Andrew Thomas. Like they have great players from top to bottom in every single position room, and that is what I want for the Giants. And it needs to start in the NFL draft. And I'm hopeful that Joe Schoen can do it, but I'm not confident he can do it because he's had plenty of opportunities to do it through 2 drafts, and it's a big TBD right now.
Not that he was the main one responsible for those Buffalo drafts, but if you really look back at a lot of the Buffalo drafts, there's a lot of Josh Allen and free agency holding up that roster. They spent a lot of money on their defense and free agency the last few years, and obviously Josh Allen covers up a lot of mistakes. So it's I think both Monty and I've talked about it, like when the search was going on in 21 at the end of 21, a lot of us were in the camp of Ortiz out of Baltimore, because that model organization, right? They just BPA, pick after pick, collect comp picks, just they hit constantly up and down the draft. San Francisco's kind of similar. We need to start doing that, or I don't care who the coach is, we're just not going to go anywhere. Yeah.
Right. 100% agree.
Yeah, and we have 7 picks in this draft. This is a big one for Joe Schoen. You can't go into the third year of your regime and say we're still kind of figuring this out. Now your roster's got to start looking filled out by the third year. Yeah. However you got there. I think that's a good segue, Justin, to start talking about. You just came back from Mobile. That must have been a fun experience, and we want to talk a little bit about the Senior Bowl. But can you tell us? I mean, since we're talking about Bowen, let's just stick with the defense. You told us before we started the pod, you focus a lot on cornerbacks, defensive linemen. Did you see anybody now in retrospect, now that you know Bowen is a coach, did you look back on your time that you learned in the Senior Bowl? Can you think of a few names off the top of your head that you thought, man, I think that guy should be a Giant?
Should be a Giant? That's tough because, I mean, the guy that I wanted to just talk about first was Quinyon
or
Mitchell.
Whoever.
He's not going to be a Giant. Quinyon Mitchell's not going to be a Giant. But you guys talked about him in your Senior Bowl defensive preview. And man, he was the most enjoyable player to watch all week. I enjoyed watching him, and I enjoyed like kind of following him. You know, I do a lot of camera work. Like I'm not a cameraman. I don't shoot things, but there's 1 week a year where I am photographer, videographer Justin Penik, and I'm filming O-line, D-line 1v1s, and I'm filming wide receiver DB 1v1s. And Quinyon Mitchell just making things look easy. You mentioned a list, Monty. What list is he on? That he's on like the fast guy list, the strong guy list, the bench guy. What list?
So Bruce Feldman every single year does the freak list. And Quinyon Mitchell, that's how I discovered him. I always like the freak list every single year because it gives you like all the best like athletes in the country. And I don't remember exactly where he was on this list. I'll see if I can get it. But
on there 20 somewhere, wasn't he? I think he was in 20 somewhere. Yeah.
But this guy out Toledo, when we were doing our preview, I always try to look at there for like my guys. We try to do an under the radar guy. And you saw his PFF numbers, and they were number 1 in the country last year, and again did it again. But then they mentioned runs a 4.3. He pushed in the bench press 21 times. He squats 440 pounds, and he's a freak athlete, and that's what you look for at the corner position.
And that's what Joe Shane loves. I mean, that's at the end of the day. I almost wish I was saying this on Talking Giants. I almost wish the draft years were flopped, and what we had the 24th or the 25th pick. I know we traded up one. We have that mid-20s draft pick last year, and Quinyon Mitchell's there. Run to the phone. Like I'm running to the phone. He checks all those boxes, right? It's like, what do you want in corners in the NFL? You want them to run fast, and you want their arms to be over 30 inches, and you want them to be versatile. The thing that was impressive about Mitchell was that in 1v1s, obviously that's man coverage. So 1v1s, locking guys down, running with them really well, staying in their kind of back hip pockets, not getting too grabby, making plays on the football when he were there and pouncing on the football, but then also in team drills when he was in zone. I'm a big fan, and Carl Banks talked about this years ago, and I kind of picked up on this, where it's like in zone coverage, you don't want to cover the grass. You want to cover the men in your grass. What's the point of covering grass when even though maybe this guy isn't in your assignment, but he's nearby you, and you sense that he's the only guy near you, so if you're in zone coverage, go up and get him. And that's what Quinyon Mitchell was doing. Maybe it's not the assignment, but he was running up, making plays, reading where the quarterback was going, and Quinyon Mitchell was just easily, and I know a lot of people have reported on this, so I'll stop it with this. Quinyon Mitchell, best player to watch. I wish he was a Giant. Maybe he will be a Giant, but I'm gonna guess he's probably not. He's probably not a Giant. Unfortunately,
he's probably a top 15 pick after the Senior Bowl. Yeah, I mean, we when we did our cornerback preview, I think was that our last one before we did the quarterbacks? It might have been, right, or one of them.
Yeah, that or safety.
Yeah, by then we were like, I mean, we did something like 80 player reviews by that point, and as you've done player reviews, I'm sure like you're like going through tape and pulling up notes, and it's like pulling teeth to get through some of these. Mitchell was exciting. We're like, wow, Monty's like, have you seen this guy Mitchell? I was like, who? And he found him. He's like, look at him on the freak list. And we pulled him up. I'm like, wow, this guy looks really good. Why is nobody talking about him? And then sure enough, like a week later, like Feldman came out and was like, oh, this guy should be a first round pick. And then he's been rising ever since. My guy on that list was actually a Rutgers native, Max Melton. I don't know if you got a chance to see Max. So he's a guy who I think he could be in range for the Giants. I like him as like a nickel in the NFL. What did you think about Max? Did you watch him at all?
Yes, and the Giants do need a nickel, and there's another guy that I want to talk about possibly at nickel as well. But Max, I think the Senior Bowl doesn't do Max Melton justice because I think he's a fiery player. I think he's like a high motor, high effort kind of player. He was one of the guys that I did like a really good write up before I actually went down there. And it's not like he had a bad week. It's just that he didn't have a week that I feel like really kind of stood out. I feel like he's another guy that's great feel for zone and covering the man in your zone, not covering just grass. He has a ton of experience. I think his route recognition and reading the QB's eyes are very good. I think he can play like a madman and he could be over aggressive. And I think his over aggressiveness can sometimes kill him. Even I think that's, in the pass game. And then also he had a high missed tackle rate in 2023 as well. And he doesn't seem like a scheme dependent player. So I think Melton's a guy that's versatile and can kind of go everywhere. So from the Senior Bowl week, I was actually kind of like disappointed that he didn't flash, but I think it's also good that in a week like that, he wasn't like consistently getting his ass kicked in 1v1s with some, really talented receivers on both the American and the national side. So I think Melton's like tape speaks more than kind of what he did down in Mobile.
He didn't get his ass kicked by Marvin Harrison Jr., which is where we kind of noticed and we're like, he held up.
Mm-hmm.
He held up with against Marvin Harrison Jr., against Emeka Egbuka. I mean, he did a good job. My criticism of him, I think we both mentioned it, is he can kind of do everything and stay with receivers, but he doesn't turn around for the ball. Like, he's a guy who's just in the NFL, he's going to get a lot of PI penalties for just not turning around. But if you still have Henderson, hopefully,
yeah,
and you get a guy like that, we hope you could, that's something he coaches, right? He talks about coaching, turn around, use your outside arm, get to the ball. So, ball skills are something he can work on. So I like him. I don't think he's going before. I don't know if he's going to make it into day 2. I think he's a day 3 guy. Maybe day 2, end of day 2, but I can see us getting him in the 4th if we want him, or later.
Yeah. Another guy I want to mention, he's small. I didn't realize he was this small, but we interviewed him down in Mobile our first day down there. DJ James out of Auburn. He's 5'11", 170 pounds. I hope he actually gains some weight. But he has 31-inch arms. So again, you check that. I have a prerequisite box of if you have arms that are longer than 30 inches, cool, you're an NFL corner. So definitely with that size, it seems like he's going to be in the slot. I'll start off with the interview first because we didn't really know him before we actually sat down with him in that interview. And then he actually did have a good week in Mobile. And it's like, oh, cool. This is kind of awesome. So DJ James, really smart dude. And one of the things that we asked, we had about 8 player interviews. We asked each player as kind of like a social series, but we also, Bobby and I genuinely like this question. We asked him, think of a play or a series of plays, whatever. Think of a specific play that you want to take to NFL scouts and say, this is what I'm about. DJ James was able to rip off like 2 or 3 on the top of his head. This is the core, this is the situation. This is the team. This is what we were doing. This is what I did. Ripped off a few of them on the top of his head. It's like, oh shoot, good for you, man. So DJ James, really well spoken, really smart guy, corner out of Auburn again. And he had a good week. He's a good athlete. Obviously really light. Obviously, I guess there's some questions around him tackling, and I think it's going to be really important under this Bowen system that the corners get better at tackling. Like that was rip your hair out frustration from the 2023 Giants is that Adoree Jackson, a guy who seemed to have all the effort in the world of wanting to be involved in the run game, just suddenly didn't want to get involved, and the rest of the corners sucked at being involved in the run game and stopping the run. That's certainly a concern with a guy like DJ James, but they need a slot corner. Joe Shane likes athletes, and DJ James fits that.
Yeah, he is a little. I think he's listed at like 165 or something on the Auburn. So I don't know what he weighed in at. I don't remember what he weighed in Senior Bowl, but I mean that's Cordell Flott range, the Emmanuel Forbes range. That's tough. And Cordell Flott, I mean we don't discuss him, but I don't see him having a place on this defense.
That's the one guy where I think it hurts him. Where I think it hurts because especially
you think he can hold up on the outside because that's probably his only place. They play a lot of off man, They
play cover one, but I think Flott's issue is in zone where he has these amazing is a tough word, but he has these really good man coverage plays where it's like remember that even like he had like a diving pass deflection against Tyreek Hill last year. I'm like, where did this come from? And then I think in zone coverage he just sometimes just doesn't know where the hell he's going, and I think that's the concern where if you're gonna have, I think Bowen likes to do these like disguising coverage stuff. And if you're going to have guys running at the snap, kind of if there's a safety that's showing up and you have a slot corner that's maybe in the box, but he needs to drop back into, a cover 3, whatever, transition a cover 1 into a cover 3 or, whatever. Flott needs to know where to be and where he needs to go and what's going on around him. And I don't think he has that right now, which is kind of unfortunate. So that's another like prerequisite if you're looking for, if you're looking for corners in this draft, guys that maybe can handle that.
I mean, a guy we both love who was not at the Senior Bowl was Mikey Sainristil. I don't know if you saw him from Michigan. This guy, if you
pulled
watch
out
him,
last
you're
second.
gonna love him.
There was a lot of guys that pulled out last second, and
Yeah.
and all of them seemed to be players that's like, damn, I was really excited to watch you, and he was one of the guys that I did a write up on, and he was not there.
Yeah, I know there were tons of guys, especially on the line, right? Fountain, Barton, all these guys. We can get into that, but we are big proponents of if we're going to draft a lineman, draft somebody who can play tackle, draft someone who can play guard. Draft someone with that versatility, add it to the room. Barton fits that. Fountain fits that. Those guys, I don't know about Fountain, but Barton, I think, might be there for the Giants in the second round if we go down that route. We'll see, but I want to stay on the defense. Unless Monty, do you want to go through any more corners or?
One last thing I want to point in. So I looked up DJ James' numbers. He was taller than we gave him credit for. He's 5'11 and a half, and he was 170 pounds. So light as expected. The other thing I wanted to ask you, Justin, was there any like defensive backs who stood out to you in a bad way at the Senior Bowl?
Oh, yeah. And I was glad that my pre-work on him kind of, I'm not rooting for anybody to be bad, but I was like, I had some questions on Kalen King out of Penn State. He did not have a good week. And one of the biggest critiques that I had on Kalen King, again, coming out of Penn State, cornerback, one of the biggest critiques I had was he doesn't get out of his back pedal. Like, it takes him way too long to transition out of his back pedal, whether it's flipping his hips or, getting into a full-on sprint. Again, I don't really know all these formal terminologies, but I'm like, you gotta go. You gotta go. You're backpedaling way too long, and these receivers are running right by you. And we actually interviewed Kalen King, and I didn't ask him about that. It's like, hey, I think this is your flaw. What do you think about this? So I didn't ask him about that, but I did ask him, hey, like in 2022, you and Johnny Dixon, Johnny Dixon was also in Mobile. He was his a DB teammate. You and Johnny Dixon had like double-digit pass deflections in 2022, and in 2023, I said for both of you, it went down to like the single digits. So I said, what happened there? Like, why did that ball production? Why did the plays that you made on the football? Why did that change? You can maybe point to that. Maybe they're just not very good, but he pointed to Joey Porter Jr.'s presence and how Joey Porter Jr.'s presence in 2022, how they were getting the ball thrown at him constantly. So Kalen King kind of turned it into a very good positive of, how, hey, in 2022, if you want to see tape of me getting targeted, turn on 2022 and turn on how I can, force incompletions, make pass deflections. But in 2023, his argument was that I wasn't getting targeted as much, and that's why my ball production, forced incompletions, pass deflections, that's why that went down. But he did not have a good, so I thought that was a good answer in the interview, but he did not have a good week on the practice field for sure.
There's not a single player that I was more frustrated with actually declaring in this draft than Kalen King. 2022 Kalen King was teaching tape. He was incredible. He would run routes for wide receivers if you watch him. And we commented on that, and like when we did our early scouting, like this guy's running the routes for the receivers. He's incredible. He's quick. He's instinctive. He was only in his third year this year. He's a true junior. Had an awful year, horrendous. Like he should have gone back to school. And I guess he banked on coming to the Senior Bowl and showing people what he's got, and he tanked his stock. He's looking like a day 3 pick right now. He's absolutely collapsing. This guy should have been a first-round pick. So, that's a good call.
Hopefully this doesn't turn into like an Eli Ricks thing for him where he had all the hype in the world coming in.
That's the comparison.
Yeah.
That's the comparison.
And then right to UDFA. Yeah.
So,
it's bad.
I would not be surprised if Kalen King ends up a third-round pick, how things have been trending for him. Or a day 3 pick, I'm sorry.
So before we go to the offense, on the D line, there's a guy I love. I know you guys talked about him on your preview. I think Bobby wasn't as high on him as everybody else is, and certainly I'm very high on him. What did you think of Darius Robinson?
Dude, he's probably the most complex player at the Senior Bowl. Now, I made a point after we had our recap pod and after we had our recap stuff on JM Football. I made it a point. I'm going to rewatch Darius Robinson every day and rewatch it again. Like day 1, day 2, day 3, and all of his reps. And day 1 was bad. Day 1 was not good for Darius Robinson. But day 2 and day 3, it's not that he was good, not great. And I think that's the frustrating thing, leaving the Senior Bowl with Darius Robinson. And this is where it's like, people like Bobby, I think they're right in a way. but also I think he's wrong by saying that, Darius Robinson just didn't show anything. And he's, who was the guy that he compared to Georgia? It was Georgia Tech, Keon White. He compared him to Keon White last year. Keon White flat out was not good last year. Like he just, he was strong. He had a bull rush and that was it. And Keon White didn't do anything at the Senior Bowl last year. Darius Robinson showed more than Keon White last year. Darius Robinson showed some moves. Darius Robinson showed outside, inside versatility. He showed a swim. He showed some things with his hands. It was good. It just wasn't great. Like, and if you're, the Senior Bowl is not the standard for like, these are all the first round prospects. These are the best guys in the draft. And if you don't win against them, hey, it's all right. These guys are just good. A lot of these guys are trying to increase their stock. They took this invite for a reason. Darius Robinson was already getting first round hype. I don't leave the Senior Bowl saying that, I think Darius Robinson maybe, and I don't like putting grades on guys because I don't know if I'm fully smart enough, but I don't leave the Senior Bowl saying Darius Robinson, clear-cut first-round player, but I am leaving the Senior Bowl saying Darius Robinson is a good player, and he did show outside-inside versatility. He showed he can do some things with his hands, and he is strong as shit.
He hasn't played edge except for this year. That's the interesting thing. So, in 2021, he was only in the B gap, like almost exclusively. In 2022, mostly in the B gap, more in the A gap than he was over tackle. Like he was truly an interior lineman. And then he kind of transitioned suddenly to the outside of, a true edge rusher this year. So there's a lot of unlocked raw potential there, in my opinion. This guy's, he's like, 6'5", 290. I think he weighed a little less than 290, but he played around 290 this year. Mm-hmm. Strong as hell. So again, I'm just thinking like, what kind of edge rusher do we need? If we're going to rush 4, we need a pass rushing interior lineman, 5-tech, somebody who can take on the Leonard Williams role. I think Robinson will be there in the second for the Giants. I agree with you. I don't think he's going in the first. Not in this class, which is loaded with so many talents in the first round. I'd be shocked if Darius Robinson went in the first. I mean, I can see him blowing up the combine, but I still don't see him going into the first. If he's there in the second, he's one of those guys I'm looking at with either the first or the second round pick we have. I'm thinking you might get your 3-down lineman right there. And he does not have to be like a traditional, edge like Kayvon Thibodeau in this system. I think he can be your guy between Kayvon and Dexter Lawrence. That's how I'm looking at him.
Yeah, and I have to go back and I have to rewatch him, but even guys like Brugler, who are, obviously Brugler's like the tip top of all this, right? Like everybody aspires to be, but even he was like, this Senior Bowl week affirms why Darius Robinson is first round. I'm like, it doesn't. He had a good week. Again, he had a good week. He had a bad day one, and I think, sometimes guys that have bad day ones, it's kind of like the Rashee Rice effect. If you have a bad day one, then that means like automatically the rest of your week is bad. Not necessarily the case with Darius Robinson, and I think Bobby falls in that boat of being a little too heavy on the day one critiques. But yeah, man, I don't know if the Senior Bowl affirmed Darius Robinson as a first round pick, because also, I mean, there are questions, like you're saying, there are questions of where exactly does he fit? Is he maybe even? Do you think he's also the victim of the Senior Bowl wearing a single digit number and being an interior defensive lineman? Do you think he's too small to be an interior defensive lineman, but is he possibly too big to be an edge rusher? That's my question about him.
I think he's strong. I mean, he's very, very strong. I don't think his weight is going to hold him back from playing on the inside at all. With his frame, I mean, you saw him. He's lean for a guy his size. I can see
you can
him.
Also ask him to put on 10 pounds.
Right. I mean, I think he can easily put on 10, 15 pounds and it barely show up, and bother him. I think he has that kind of frame and his height and his frame. So I don't think so. I think he's the kind of talent that I would take a swing on. Again, hand him and Andre Patterson and say, do something with him. Figure out what you're going to do with him. I like that kind of raw talent. Monty, what do you think about this guy? Or I don't know if you had anybody else you want to talk about.
Yeah, so I think something worth mentioning as far as finding a fit for him if we got Darius Robinson is I think his name is Danico Autry, the guy who had 11.5 sacks for the Titans last year. Yeah. He played defensive line. 6'5", 285 pounds. The exact same measurements that you see from Darius Robinson. So they're obviously like, that's not to compare them as players, but purely from a size standpoint that does fit. And it's funny you mentioned Keon White, and I do agree with you, Justin, where I do see differences with he wins in different ways, like he does. He has more versatility than Keon White. But where I actually saw some of that too, where it popped in the head. But really, it was because these guys were both they're like former basketball players. They have this huge, like built out body, but they still like are just like long athletes. And I think that's a lot of things people liked about Keon White. He ended up going like top 10 or something in the second round.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think he's going to, I think he's going to test incredibly. And that, if he's going to go first round, that might be what pushes it even further, is because he's probably going to go to the combine and blow it up. But yeah, he seemed to have a really good week. So, it was interesting to hear more of him. One guy I wanted to ask you about, Justin. It's another guy that I've liked a lot throughout this process. And I think the Senior Bowl was kind of built for a guy like this because, the offensive linemen have such an advantage in some of these one-on-ones. I saw Michael Hall put up some freaky reps with his athleticism from Ohio State. He's a guy who he has like 20 plus miles per hour, like tracked on the GPS, apparently. Like, he's a freaky athlete. He's a little bit small, but did you notice anything from Michael Hall this week?
Yeah. I mean, he was one of those guys that flashed occasionally, like didn't have a great week, but he was one of those guys that I have a document written down of just names of guys that I would want to bring up in this show, and he made it. And his name is right next to Dwayne Carter from Duke and Latu from UCLA, and also Gabe Hall. Like, I would say like Gabe Hall, especially from the national team, and that's the team that first practices in the morning. I would say that Gabe Hall of those interior defensive linemen took it away, and he was like the best. And it's like, hey, if there's a guy that I'm pointing to, like, hey, I want you to be a Giant, it's Gabe Hall. But certainly Michael Hall Jr. Stood out as well.
Tell us a little bit more about Gabe Paul. We didn't do any review on Gabe Paul. Tell our listeners a little bit about Gabe Paul and what you liked about him.
Uses his hands, and that was one of the things that stuck out. Obviously, plays with a little bit of mean streak. You want the guy that's strong too, but out of all the interior defensive linemen, pass rushing 1v1, used his hands and utilized a swim move. It was a wide swim move, so obviously you expose yourself from the ribs, and sometimes you want maybe swim moves to be a little bit more tighter, so it's efficient, so it's less wasted movement. But it was working for him, and that was the guy that consistently from the American team. And I would say over the last couple of years, it's been kind of a little bit of running theme at the Senior Bowls that O-line's kind of dominated. Like, we always say that O-line, D-line, 1v1s, it's always suited for the defensive linemen, and they're going to have more wins. O-line's been kicking ass the last couple of years, and it was nice to see Gabe Hall, even from day one, set the tone. Gabe Hall from Baylor, interior defensive lineman. I like to repeat names since people listening on podcasts sometimes forget who are these guys talking about. Gabe Hall.
I always appreciate that.
Gabe Hall, Baylor, interior defensive lineman, used his hands really well, offered a swim move, and really started off didn't take him the whole week to kind of get going. Day one, came with energy, and he carried it through the whole week.
That's awesome. We have to look into Gabe Hall. I heard things coming out of Mobile. We really didn't review him. It wasn't really on our radar. I'm surprised he did as well as he did, but it's worth. That's why you guys go to these things. Then you find out if there's a sleeper. Along those lines, let's switch to the O-line. So before, I don't know if you heard our O-line preview. We loved Christian Haynes. Like when we watched his film, and then I heard everybody loved Christian Haynes.
Yep.
So I mean, I don't know if there's much more to add, but what were your thoughts just watching him?
He was just good. Like, he was just one of the best players there. If I would say he was the best guard, because he had JPJ there, Jackson Powers Johnson too. Haynes snapping the ball wasn't as fun, especially when you had I think Devondre Sweat was on the same team. Let me make sure. No, he was not on the same team. I lied. But Christian Haynes snapping the ball wasn't as fun, but as a guard, he's dominant. I won't say Zion Johnson levels of dominance when Zion Johnson was there, but he was really good. I think he was the best guard that we saw from both practices. I would say JPJ, Jackson Powers Johnson, was the best center, and then I would say Christian Haynes and my guy Isaiah Adams coming out of Illinois were like two of the best guards for sure.
Yeah, I heard Isaiah Adams did good. We haven't done much on him, but I thought was interesting.
He was my favorite player.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
I have to do some work on him. But what I thought was interesting about Christian Haynes is, we just kind of did one game each for these guys when we were doing our previews for the Senior Bowl, and we watched the Michigan game for Christian Haynes, and he was bullying those talents, Mozzie Smith, Chris Jenkins, all that in the run game, and he had like perfect perfect technique in the run game. It looked like he was like pushing the sled, like how they teach you. But they didn't really pass the ball too much that game, so I didn't get he had good numbers, but I didn't get a good vibe for how good of he was as a pass protector. And then he went to the Senior Bowl and
dominated.
And nobody could beat him, man. You don't see people dominate as a pass protector like that. And this is to add on to how much I already loved him as a run blocker. I loved him as a run blocker. So
yeah,
really seems like the full package there.
Yep.
He had 2,423 college snaps, every single one of them at right guard. Every single one of them at right guard. So, I mean, this guy he's a thoroughbred of a right guard, through and through. I mean, this one is not complicated. I think if you take Christian Haynes, you slide him over to right guard and say, that's yours. Yep. Handle it, and that's all. We love the guy. But we were talking about him. I'm glad you mentioned Zion Johnson, because that's the vibe he was giving us going into the Senior Bowl. I remember Monty and I talking about it. We're like, this guy might have like a Zion Johnson like Senior Bowl, and then everybody's going to talk about him. And Zion Johnson went like 17th or overall or something crazy. Like, it wouldn't shock me to see a guy like Haynes fly up the boards and somebody say, "I need a guard. I'm taking this guy at the end of the first round" or something. It wouldn't shock me at all.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. The guy who didn't come, who kind of pissed me off because I wanted him to get exposed, was Cooper Beebe. Everybody loves Cooper Beebe. When you watch his film, I think my comment was, this is what I imagine Evan Neal would look like if he played guard the way he plays tackle. So just big, slow, lumbering, just no athleticism at all. I think there's a reason he didn't come to Mobile, because I don't know if he was hurt or not, but I mean, in those one-on-ones against those one-gappers, I thought he was going to get his lunch eaten.
You got to move your feet.
But we'll see where he goes. I hope we don't take him. I'm so tired of these big lumbering dudes. I want guys like Haynes on this team. Did you see any other linemen that caught your eye? That you said Isaiah Adams?
Yeah, I want to talk about him, because I do feel like he's worth talking about. And I've seen now, since the Senior Bowl ended, I've seen some people talk about it, and I'm glad. The Giants, and I'm also happy that Pat Leonard, out of all names that Pat Leonard could have tweeted out towards the latter end of the week, he tweets out Isaiah Adams, that the Giants had 2 meetings with him. Now, I don't know how much stock you take into meetings at the Senior Bowl, because literally every single Senior Bowl prospect, I think they're talking to every team, whether it's for 5 minutes, 45 minutes. I don't know. We kind of asked the guys that we interviewed. Isaiah Adams was not one of them. Like, what do you expect? What was the interview process like the first day? So we kind of got a little bit of an impression when we talked to some of these guys. But they're talking to every team. But Giants did meet with him twice at the Senior Bowl. The biggest thing with Isaiah Adams is his hands, which I thought he was really great hand placement in 1v1s, and he was constantly looking to replace his hands. Place, replace, not getting his hands beat, not getting his hands down, constantly getting his hands back in good position. Really good lower body strength. He did lose initially at the point of attack, and I think where you saw his legs come in was, when he lost initially at the point of attack, he would re-anchor really well. I think his upper body strength needs a little work. I think his hand technique is great, but I think the upper body strength needs a little work. So I'm excited to actually go and watch it and see, it may actually hold up better in film, because those O-line D-lines, they are naturally designed for the D lineman to have an advantage, especially initially, because there's just so much space for them to operate. So Isaiah Adams out of Illinois, interior offensive lineman, I thought was consistently had really good technique. Another lineman I want to just mention too, because I loved him. Bo Limmer out of Arkansas. Now, the Giants aren't necessarily looking for a center. I think he is a center. He was doing both center and guard. But Bo Limmer out of Arkansas is just, if you want to watch, hopefully his film translates to what he was doing out in the Senior Bowl. If you just want a nasty lineman to watch, awesome. He was one of the only interior offensive linemen, too. Really one of the only linemen to utilize a hop step all week. Usually that's like a thing that you see Andrew Thomas do it all the time. Hop, hop. It's a way to kind of stabilize yourself, right? One of the only linemen to really utilize a hop step. There was one rep, Tavondre Sweat's best rep of the week, where Sweat just ran Bo Limmer over, and Bo Limmer was utilizing the hop step, ironically enough. So Bo Limmer was really fun to watch. He was nasty, utilized the hop step. If you want to check him out, you can check him out as well.
We'll add him to our list. That's helpful to know. Any of I hate talking about tackles, I really do, but I think it's a discussion. Now, I'm personally, we asked this question. We did our mock draft last week. Somebody asked us, "Is there any pick the Giants can make at 7 that'll make you just absolutely disgusted?"
Oh, can I give you can I tell you a nugget? Can I give you a nugget that I heard at the Senior Bowl?
Sure.
So the first this guy, he closely works with the Giants, may work with the Giants. This guy said, first of all, about Kafka, was like, Giants are not going to grant Kafka a lateral jump, because all that Bobby was hearing was that Kafka's gone. And I'm kind of sitting here being like, I don't think Kafka's gone, because I don't think Kafka's getting a head coaching job. And I'm sitting here just inferring that the Giants are not going to let him do a lateral jump. If the Giants were not wanting to let Kafka call plays, then I would be like, yeah, they should grant a lateral jump, but should is the key word in that. So we talked to that guy, and this is before it was official that Kafka was coming back. Talked to that guy on Monday, the Senior Bowl, was like, yeah, they're not gonna grant the lateral jump. They're not gonna grant that interview. Then a couple of days later, might even been a whole week later, Giants deny the request from the Seahawks. So that's one thing, but that was already done. The second thing is, Bobby asked, how tied are they to Evan Neal? Like, how are they gonna, would they take one, not even the first round, would they take one in the second, third round? And guys like, second round, they may take one in the first. Like, it's open. So, you take everything with a grain of salt, and you got to think of where people come from and what they're telling you and who they're working for, who they answer to and stuff like that. But there was two nuggets, the Kafka thing, which is already irrelevant because he's here. And then the second thing it's like, they may not hesitate to take a tackle in the first round just because they have the Evan Neal investment.
Wow.
And that doesn't make you feel good, Sal.
No.
Is it because of, so let me ask you this. Is it because of just the fact that we have so much capital in the Giants offensive line, or is it this crop of tackles?
No, the tackles are fantastic. It's partially, number one. It's also partially because I feel very strongly about the quarterback position. We both do. And I feel strongly that this quarterback class is full of talent, 1 through at least 5, maybe 1 through 6. And I think if there's anything that Brian Dable can do well, it's develop quarterbacks. And I want to see him actually get a real talent. And there's no guarantee we're going to be drafting in the top 10 anytime soon again. You just never know.
Right.
And if you are, next year's class, at least on paper right now, is not as good as this class, this quarterback.
And if you're drafting top 10, odds are it may not be Brian Dable that's leading the charge.
Exactly. So I know people are fixated on, the top three. I mean, we did our breakdown. In my opinion, there's Caleb, and there's close behind him, there's Drake May in terms of projectable talent. And then everybody else is sort of here. But here is still better than most quarterback classes. Just to be clear, like, this is still better than most quarterback classes. So I would rather they just figure out a way to get one in the first round and just move on. I'm not saying they have to trade the farm to try to get up to Caleb at 1 or whatever. Like, they can do whatever they want. But I'm very much in the camp, like, I believe that the one thing Brian Dable does is take a quarterback and turn him into something really good. I want to see him get a real talent, like a real projectable talent, and see what he can do, because that was the whole point of getting Brian Dable here, right? Mm-hmm. Develop your offense, develop a quarterback, and I just want to see it. And this might be their only shot. This really might be their only shot at getting that kind of talent. So that's the main reason. But the other thing is, Andrew Thomas, 4th overall pick, great, all-pro left tackle, fine. Evan Neal, 7th overall pick. Are we going to use another top 10 pick on a tackle, the third one in 5 years?
Yeah,
that's insanity. Nobody does that, Plus, we need a right tackle, not a left tackle. I know that tackles are similar in value, but I think you can get a good right tackle later in the draft. I think you can get these guys who can play. I think you can get them in free agency, and put them out there and just be good run blockers and just functional pass blockers, and you're okay. I don't think you have to keep throwing major investments at this. So yeah, the top of the draft is Joe Alt, Olufashanu as left tackle. If you want to take one of those guys, you're moving them to right tackle. Or are you moving all-pro Andrew Thomas? That doesn't make sense to me. No. So you're moving one of these guys who've never played right tackle. You're moving them to right tackle. Now, Joe Alt might project as the right tackle, but he's never played it. The other guys are guys like Fuaga at right tackle, Amarius Mims. I mean, you're talking about, there's no way. If we call those names, I really might do something horrible. I'm just like, I mean, I don't know how you feel about it, but I'm just like, are we going to really do this again? I'd rather just see what the coach can do and get a free agent in here than keep spending first round picks on this.
We'll see, man. Because I also could subscribe to the theory of these wide receivers. You usually don't take wide receivers in the top 10. You usually don't. And the premium positions in the top 10 are quarterback, tackle, and edge, right? Those are like three of the main premium positions that you take. And if there's a generational defensive lineman, right? Like a la like Jalen Carter should have been a top 10 last year. A guy that can get after, I guess I'll say edge. I'll put edge under the umbrella. I'll put edge under the umbrella of a guy that can get after the quarterback and a pass rusher. Yes. So thank you. If you subscribe to that theory, then tackle it is. I don't know. My brain isn't there yet. Like I haven't. My brain is still so scrambled, and my now that we're into this. Don't worry about time. By the way, I'm having a great time.
Okay.
I want to trade up.
Yeah, you want to get your quarterback. Yeah,
I want to trade up. Can I tell you what I want? I want Caleb. I am unapologetically. I don't even know. I'm going to be honest, guys. I don't even know if I'm going to watch a single Caleb Williams play. You want to know why? Because I just think he's good, and I think he makes every. I was saying this today. He just makes every throw. Every throw, and that's not. And I don't even. Am I being sarcastic? I try not to be.
No,
especially with NFL draft, where Bobby and I are trying to challenge ourselves. Bobby especially, but it's like, hey, I look up to Bobby with this stuff too. So, it's like I want this draft season to be not just about everybody's not good, because that's all the draft scouts and the whatever. Everybody in NFL draft land thinks everybody's going to be good. When odds are, if everybody was going to be good, then there would be a lot more teams in the NFL that would be very good. A lot of these guys are not going to be very good. Now, that doesn't mean you get to be an asshole, but I think you gotta look at things through rose-colored lenses. Is that the right phrase? I think Caleb Williams is amazing in the throws that he can make, and I don't even know if there even is pre-draft work that you need to do on a guy like Caleb Williams. What really comes down to it with me, this is with any quarterback, is what's between the years, and it's also your heart and your willingness to work hard and get better. That's probably even more key than your brain. Is that do you have a guy that's going to be here despite that has all the talent in the world? I mean, even a guy like Drake May, Jaden Daniels will help. We'll even throw JJ McCarthy in that boat too. Guys that have all the talent in the world. Are they willing to work hard? Are they willing to get better? And that's the frustrating thing about the draft is that we have zero of those answers. We have zero. We're not talking to these guys. We don't really know who they are as people. That's why it was so cool to talk to 8 of them at the Senior Bowl, because you got a little bit of a glimpse. I got a little bit of a glimpse that Peyton Wilson's a really smart dude. And as long as he stays healthy, I think Peyton Wilson's going to be a very good player for a very long time. He's a linebacker out of NC State that you guys like. Javon Baker, gotta admit, kid reminded me a little bit of Kadarius Toney. I don't fully know if you know.
He's in Florida.
I don't fully know. Hey, explosive player, averages like 21 yards per reception. I don't fully know if he knows what the hell's going on out there. So that was helpful. That was helpful to even just talk to them for 8 minutes.
Can I stop you there for a second?
Yes.
Can you imagine Joe Judge and Dave Gettleman actually meeting with Kadarius Toney and coming out of that meeting
in that room.
and like
if there is
first round pick,
you know what?
And DeAndre Baker.
Scenarios. I'm sorry, this is not good radio. Me interrupting you. There are so many things in my life. This is not even my life. There are so many things in life. Like if you Genie, if you could be a fly on the wall for anything in the world that has happened, whether it's your life, someone else's life, or society. Like, oh, I would love to be there for the Giants winning the Super Bowl. I would love to be there for blah, 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 blah. No, I want to be there for the Joe Judge Kadarius Toney Senior Bowl interview. What the hell did he say to Joe Judge that blew him away? And Joe Judge said, yeah, I can work on that.
I don't need Christian Darrisaw. I need Kadarius Toney.
I can do it. Hey, John and Dave. John and Dave, you guys probably hate this guy. I got him. And you know what's crazy? Look at what Tony's done in Kansas City and how kind of kooky he's been. Relatively to what he was like with he was kind of quiet on it. Like Joe Judge kind of did keep him on the wraps a little bit. So I guess Joe Judge was right, but Joe Judge being right for 2 good Kadarius Toney games doesn't get you to save your job.
But shifting back to like what you were saying about the quarterbacks, like I mean, we're with you. We love Caleb. You're not. I don't think you're exaggerating. Caleb does things that are very special, and you don't see that often. Maybe every 5-6 years, you might come across a talent like that. He's really special. Everything I've heard about him and read about him is he is one of the hardest workers you can imagine. He studies film. There's a lot on his film that's frustrating, but if you really watch Lincoln Riley's offenses, a lot of that is Lincoln Riley offenses.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a lot of, hey, Caleb, snap the ball and figure it the fuck out. You know, just that's what it is. I mean, there's like no schemed openings. It's a lot of, hey, Caleb, hit home runs, and he's holding on to the ball looking for home runs. It's exactly the kind of thing where you think like, man, give this guy to Mike Kafka and Brian Dable and watch them like just say, you know what, Caleb, take the slant. It's okay.
Mm-hmm.
Just take the layup, and then we'll utilize your talent. We were so excited. I mean, obviously we weren't happy that we were losing, but when we were collapsing, we're like, all right, we're going to get it. We might get the top pick here. We might get top 2. And then I remember, this is one of those moments in my life I'll never forget, is I was driving home with my family. I think we went to see a movie or something, and that was the day of the Giants-Patriots game. You were at that freaking game, and you were supposed to keep Bobby out of it, not you. I told Monty, I was like, do not let Bobby Skinner in that building. Do not let Bobby Skinner in that building, because he's always bragging about how they never lose when he's in that freaking building. And I was like, he must not go in that building. And I was like, I don't give a shit if he's 6'9", 300 and whatever pounds. You get in his way. You play football. Stop him. And then like I'm driving home, and he texts me. He's like he's in the building. I was like, all right, whatever. And then I'm like I'm turning towards my house, and I get like a notification. And I just look at my phone, and it's like, oh, the Patriots are driving. They're at whatever the 17-yard line or whatever. Okay, they'll tie it.
It was an extra. It was like
I pull into my garage and I look down, and it's like final score, Giants win. I was like, no, they missed that. Like they missed it.
Gross.
Gross. Neither of us got a top 2 pick. Patriots didn't even end up with a top 2 pick.
And so, I mean, I don't care if people are upset that I was pissed off that they won that game. I was like, that game was so meaningless.
Yeah.
And oh god. Anyway, so I want us to get Caleb. I don't think Chicago's going to trade the pick. I mean, I thought they were for a while, but I don't know how you can look at Justin Fields and his body of work. He can't read defenses all that great. He hasn't developed much. He's going to his 4th year. You got to pay him. And look at Caleb Williams and be a talent evaluator and say, I can have that guy for cheap or that guy for expensive. I'm going to keep the lesser player for more money. And I don't see it. I think they're shopping it in the sense that like, hey, if somebody wants to Herschel Walker this thing and hand over the entire organization to me over the next 5 years, I'll think about it. But at the end of the day, I don't think they're trading the pick. And I don't think any of those 3 teams are going to trade that pick. I really don't. I think the Giants are going to have to decide, are they taking a quarterback at 6 or are they going to try to play the board? But if they don't come away with the quarterback, and I mean, who knows what they're going to do, but if they don't come away with the quarterback in this class and we're dealing with not so great, often injured Daniel Jones and whoever the hell they put as backup, and we win, 6-7 games next year, do you see this coaching staff surviving? Because I don't. I think that might be curtains for them. You know, and that's my fear.
This is what I'll say about the whole trade thing is, I mean, I don't know if Chicago will trade it. I also agree that my thought is they probably won't. But I know there's a lot of Giants fans who are like against trading up for a quarterback because they look at, recent trade ups and that work. This is my theory about it. I think that most teams, which is why I don't think these will trade this pick, will not trade out of quarterbacks like Caleb Williams or Drake May. When those quarterbacks are available, they get picked. And it's very rare where there's an Eli Manning type trade or whatever you want to reference and people trade out of these picks. I mean, the Dolphins offered 3 first-round picks for Joe Burrow, and the Bengals said, no, thanks, but, whatever. And I think that the quarterbacks that do get traded up for, that these teams usually are willing to move out, aren't these top-of-the-line quarterbacks. So, when you have an opportunity at one of these guys, I don't think these people should be as worried as they are about moving up for a guy like Caleb Williams if the opportunity comes available.
I mean, you're talking about trading probably 3 firsts, including it's really the pick swap, 2 firsts, and maybe a couple of day 2 picks. That's probably the price, But who knows? I mean, who knows with the Caleb tax, what it'll look like if it's even available. I don't know if it's available to us. I've seen the ridiculous stories of Drake May falling. I'm confident that I'm pretty convinced that's Joe Shane spreading rumors about Drake May to try to get him to fall right to 6, because I don't buy it. I don't buy any of this stuff. But we're actually big JJ McCarthy fans on this
I
pod.
know.
We
I know
like
you
him,
are.
and we're kind of standing on a hill by ourselves with a couple of other people. But we're standing by our projection here. And Harbaugh loves the kid, obviously. He has all the talent in the world. So again, I want to see talent like that work with Brian Dable. That's my point. Like, to me, that's worth more than a tackle. But that's way more. Even if you can't get Caleb Williams, that's worth more than talent.
I'll tell you what. That's what Tommy DeVito and Tyrod Taylor proved, because it was different from Daniel Jones. I'm not going to say it was good. It was great, right? It was different from Daniel Jones, and you saw results that weren't putrid. And like before the turmoil of do these coaches secretly want to murder each other? Before that came out, I ended the season, especially kicking the shit out of the Eagles. Again, wins, losses.
That was fun.
You ended that season where it's like, all right, well, again, you look. We were talking pre-show about my tweet from weeks 11 to 18. The Giants had 14 pass plays of 20 plus yards, and weeks 11 to 18 was a post Daniel Jones ACL world. The Giants ranked 12th in the NFL during that span, and this is where the margin was between 0 to 21 points. So it's a pseudo game neutral script. I would say 0 to 14 is a little bit more game neutral, but you get the point. 12th in the NFL in 20 plus yard pass plays when you have a running game that is non-existent with Tommy DeVito and Tyrod Taylor, who are not starters in the NFL, with Brian Dable, Mike Kafka, and Shea Tierney leading the way, with whoever at offensive line, Justin Pugh straight off the couch, blah, 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 and, no wide receiver one, and Hyatt's barely kind of involved, all these kind of things. Like, I want this coaching staff to get their hands on the quarterback that they want. And here are the prerequisites. Big arm.
Yep.
And you have I'm big arm. Like, I'm not, Tyrod doesn't have a big arm. He puts an arc on a ball. I want a big arm, and I want a quarterback that can extend plays with his legs and go outside the pocket, make throws outside the pocket, make throws outside the numbers. That's what I want. Like, those are the two prerequisites of really any quarterback that I would want my team or a team to draft. If you don't have those things, and obviously the work ethic is the third thing, but I can't scout that from here. I can look at the other two things. Oh, also, with the whole extending plays thing, also comes with having a sack rate that is manageable. You cannot take sacks, because sacks, while explosive plays are so important to keep a drive alive, sacks are the thing that will kill drives right away.
Yep. The most negative EPA play there is, right, is a sack, I believe. Yep. More than a turnover, obviously, but less than turnover. But yeah, we're with you. We want a big arm. We want a big projectable talent. We're actually higher on JJ than Jaden Daniels. People think we're nuts, but we did that before the Jaden Daniels hype train went completely crazy. And I'm going to stand on it. Jaden Daniels is a very big arm, and in the sense of like deep throws, at least. Our criticism of him is more of just he's a guy who's like a 1 to 2 read, see the gap, take off and run, not a scramble to throw kind of guy. Maybe that was coached, he's in that right, that Kelly offense over there in LSU, that it's kind of like that. He's a big talent. I'm not criticizing him. If he goes top 3, that's fine. If the Giants take him, I'd be happy. But we do like JJ for that reason, is that projectable. He does have a big arm. He does have that athleticism, that speed. He's probably going to go blow up the combine. I'm not going to be shocked if people are talking about him going in the 8 to 12 range come drafted. Like, his stock's going to rise, I think. And at that point, Joe Shane has to decide if that's where it is. If I like this kid and I want to give him to Brian Dable, I might just have to take him at 6. And that's why I'm not discounting any of those situations. What I don't want to do, and I've heard people argue for this, is just pass on quarterback in the first round and maybe come back to it in the second or third. I see no point in that, because what are you developing? What's the point of taking the lesser quarterback, right? At that point, you're just saying, we're not taking quarterback in this class. We're rolling with Daniel Jones. If that's going to be their approach, just sign someone, roll with it, cross your fingers, and hope you're able to survive the season.
Yeah, I'm a big believer in if there's a quarterback that you want, you should feel comfortable taking him in the first round with the pick that you have.
Yep, I agree with you fully.
That's the argument. That's the argument there. Now, hey, I guess it's working a little bit more in Dak and Brock and blah, 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 whatever. But I don't know if the Giants stumble into that. Thumbs up, great. But I don't know if that's great process for them.
That can't be the plan.
Right.
The only caveat.
Yeah.
The only caveat I'll throw into that is you should be using your intel, and obviously you don't want it to blow up in your face. But say you fall in love, and we should talk about the senior quarterbacks a little bit who are there. But say you fall in love with Michael Penix, and he's dropping because of injuries, and you feel confident he's not going to go in a certain range because of the injuries that he's had. That might give you an opportunity, like, to play the board. The issue is, I don't know, like where they are at this situation. They miss on the quarterback they get. They may all end up fired. So they're in a tough situation trying to play those games.
They might get fired anyway. How sick would we be as a fan base, as excited as we were the day Joe Schoen was hired and then Brian Dable was hired, coming off that epic divisional game between the Chiefs and the Bills, and seeing the work he did with Josh Allen? How disgusted would we be if after 3 years Brian Dable got fired and he didn't get to coach any quarterback other than Daniel Jones?
And it wouldn't be on Dable, in my opinion. It would be on Schoen.
Right.
Yep.
Right. If we lose these guys without seeing them do what they supposedly do best outside of Daniel Jones, I will forever view this as the biggest lost opportunity this organization has had in a long time. So
now here's also the thing. Gettleman got 4 years, right?
Mm-hmm.
Never made the playoffs. Joe Schoen's getting 4 years.
I think so. I think Schoen will survive. I'm not sure about Dable. That's the thing. I think Dable has done enough to separate himself from Schoen.
They're a
Are they though?
No.
Like if you're Joe Schoen, if a year from now, Brian Dable, they're a 7-win team, they roll with Daniel Jones, even if he doesn't play bad, even if he just plays like Daniel Jones, right? And he's just okay, and he gets hurt or whatever, and they win like 7-8 games. And this guy's out there, screaming and yelling, and the reporters are now there's blood in the water. The media in New York is going to be looking for every sniff of this now. If these are the stories coming out, they missed the playoffs in their third year. It's not looking great. I think he's toast.
You're making sense. I hate that you're making sense, but in my brain, it would be that Joe Schoen has done more to put it with a bad draft class, right? I'm not saying this as a blanket statement. If that were the case next year, then it would be like I would feel that Joe Schoen did more to set the team back than Brian Dable did. Like I think Brian.
I agree with you.
I think Brian Dable was one of the main reasons why the timeline was accelerated into 2022 because of the new offense, because of the coaching, because of what he did with Jones. And just the unfortunate thing is, all of our fears heading into 2023 led up to fruition, and especially one of those things being the rest of the league caught on to what the Giants were doing. They watched the 2 Eagles games and they were like, yeah, this is what they do. And Daniel Jones didn't get better.
Yeah,
that was the thing.
He couldn't elevate any more beyond that very simplified offense, and that's that. And they have their answer, right? They should know this by now. So just to kind of put a bow on it, that's kind of how I feel about the quarterback class. I mean, I don't know if you saw. We might as well hop to quarterback. Did you see or meet anybody that I know you interviewed some of these quarterbacks? Like I know you guys interviewed Penix. Yeah, what did you think of Penix?
He has a smile that is, I like. I don't know. I fell in love with the person. I'm not going to say like, oh, I fell in love with him as a quarterback. I was charmed by him. I was like, oh, you just talk and smile. Like there are people that don't do that. There's going to be an NFL team that if they need a quarterback, and Sal, I can't get over the Vikings. I can't get it out of my head. Because I totally agree with you, man, where I feel like Penix needs to go to a situation that's already kind of there, that's already kind of developed. And the Vikings have 2 good tackles. The Vikings have very good skill position players. The Vikings have good coaching. And, obviously their defense is a work in progress, but it got figured out towards the second half and the latter part of last year. So Penix does not check the prerequisite box of being able to manipulate plays. And I don't know what his sack avoidance looks like. You guys can obviously speak a little bit more to that, but I don't think he's like the guy that's going to break the pocket and make the throw on the run. And look at this. Wow, Michael Penix play. But I think that's exactly why a team like Minnesota would kind of would kind of fit him well. I was even talking to one of my buddies. He's a Steeler fan. That's like, I even feel like Michael Penix could work well there. I don't know if he could work well there because I don't know if their infrastructure is fully set up, but just knowing the type of quarterbacks that maybe they would like, I could see Michael Penix in a Steeler uniform and then attempting that to work, especially with where they're picking in the draft, and Penix may still be around. But there will be an NFL team that will fall in love with him as a person, because I kind of fell in love with him as a person when I talked to him.
He's a very advanced passer, and the kid's been through a lot of adversity. And that's something, I heard Bruce Feldman talking about this. You can't teach that, right? What you don't know about these kids is how are they going to respond to adversity and difficulty at the NFL level. And this kid's been through it at the collegiate level, at least, and he's come out the other end looking like a Heisman finalist. He reads defense as well. He's just a very good quarterback. You're right that there are some limitations with his mobility. I think it's a little overstated. His pressure to sack rate is actually the best in the class, 7%.
Love it.
So he doesn't take sacks. Like he knows how to manipulate and navigate the pocket. He has really good feet, and he gets the ball out. So what he lacks in natural raw speed and athleticism, he makes up with just his mind, his footwork, getting the ball out quick. So he's pretty good at that. I'm not too worried about him on the Giants. I do think that you have to change your offense a little bit in terms of how you call your protections. But he's a vertical threat, man. He's the kind of guy, like, I can see Dable, like, as long as you can keep him upright for a couple of seconds, I think Dable would love this kid, like, because he like you said, big arm. He's got a cannon, and I don't know if he got a chance to display it at the Senior Bowl, but on tape, he has an absolute howitzer.
That was one of the frustrating things about the Senior Bowl. It's that we're waiting, especially in team drills. It's like, let it rip, and especially the American team. Oh my God, where
he might have been hurt. You know that, right? Like Penix.
Really?
Huh? Well, they didn't announce it, but he left. If you remember the national title game,
he didn't play in the game.
Yeah, Michigan, they were killing him.
Yeah,
he was taking a beating.
I was surprised he went.
Yeah, he was holding his ribs. He injured his ribs a little bit. So I'm surprised he had healed up that quickly in a couple of weeks to play. I was like, no, that's tough. The kid is tough.
It seemed to be a coaching thing. It didn't seem to be a Penix thing at all. Maybe he was a little hurt, and that's why he didn't play in the game. Which, hey, I mean, good for him. Also he probably didn't feel the need to play in the game because Penix had a good week. He didn't have a great week. He had a good week of the Senior Bowl, and I honestly think it's an important thing for especially quarterbacks that are like highly touted, and they choose to go to the Senior Bowl, which is awesome. It's important for them to not have bad weeks.
Yeah.
I think that's the main thing, because if you have too good of a week, then people are going to get on your ass and be like, it's just practice. But if you have a bad week, then it's like, oh crap, well this guy just looked bad, and that's not good. Kenny Pickett, he looked all right, but he couldn't throw the ball through the rain at the Senior Bowl, and that was a bad mark on him that year. So Penix looked good. Didn't look great, but I also think none of the coaching and the way that the practices went, it didn't necessarily like allow any of the quarterbacks to be like, all right, show off that arm, throw it to Tez Walker 45 yards down the field, or Javon Baker 50 yards down the field, 1v1, and see if you can get that ball there and make an awesome play. So it wasn't necessarily on the cards for either coaching staff that week to really show off that kind of stuff in team drills.
I'll ask with Penix and with Nix. Did the ball look like, how'd the ball look coming off their hands? Like, I know it's a little bit different when you look to go deep, but as far as just velocity coming off their hands driving the ball, how did you see those guys?
I would say Willis. Where was he last year or 2 years ago? 2 years ago. I'd say Willis was the guy that I was like, whoa, it's apparent with him, and it wasn't that level. Nix, man, I don't know.
Yeah.
He could barely handle a snap at times, and there was a lot of it was a big like national people versus it kind of felt like us at times, but also other people were saying that he didn't look. I didn't think Nix had a bad week. I mean, could barely handle snaps. I thought he was inaccurate at times. People clipped up his good plays where it's good. Okay, he can make throws. He's a quarterback, and he'll probably be around for a long time, even as a backup, and that's good. But if we're talking about this guy as like a first-round prospect, I've moved on from the Bo Nix train. Nothing against him, but just no. Even heading in, I was a little apprehensive. Average stuff, the target stuff, and then Senior Bowl's like, all right, you're having trouble even handling a snap here. Like, okay, sayonara.
His arm, if you watch his game film, he's very accurate in the short area. A very McVay Shanahan style system. He's very good in those like between the numbers, short under 15 yards.
Mm-hmm.
Good, really great processor. You can see the experience. When he has to throw outside the numbers, if he has to throw a little bit deeper, and you watch his ball, it shows up on tape. It just dies like a duck. And I heard he was throwing some ducks out there. So I'm not surprised, unfortunately. I saw that a ton on tape.
Yeah. There was a big debate. That was one of the guys that was like Darius Robinson. It's like a big debate of look at all these throws that Bo Nix made, and then we're sitting there being like, not really. Not really the throws that you want to see these guys make this week that'll really make you go, wow, like this guy's really worth paying attention to.
I felt that Bo Nix really needed the Senior Bowl and really to live up to some of the hype he was getting leading up to like the Lance Zierleins of the world who were really hyping him up. He needed to go out there and show the ball looked different coming off his hand and be like, hey, you see me in person, watch how I can spin this thing. Like, I know you saw it in the tape, but watch me get out here and spin this. And it doesn't sound like he did that at all.
And it was unfortunate for him that he was on the same team as Michael Penix. So it's Michael Penix that's looking good. And dude, Sam Hartman even looked better than him at times from Notre Dame. Like, who's this guy running this offense? Oh, it's Sam Hartman delivering these balls. Okay. Bo Nix not obviously had his good moment. I don't want to ignore it because I know people are gonna maybe get mad, but had his good moments. But again, you're looking for these quarterbacks to separate themselves. Not just be good, not just have a high completion rate. You're looking for them to separate themselves. And Penix did that within what he was asked to do during the Senior Bowl week, and Bo Nix did not.
I'm not surprised.
I think ultimately, really where we stood is Bo Nix wasn't a good fit for us. I mean, we felt that you have to put him in a really advanced West Coast system where he can really take advantage of his weapons. And there's offenses out there, and I think Bo Nix will have his fans in the NFL. I just didn't think it made a lot of sense here. Everything I want to mention was to Penix. I'm with you, Justin. Me and Sal are a little bit different. We're both high in Penix, but Sal's much higher than I am. And it's because I'm the same as you. I have the prerequisite for quarterback where I really want somebody who can move. And where I'm kind of come from it is, I like Penix. If we took him, I'm fine with that. But I would rather be okay missing on a guy like that, the way the guys like that have gone recently, and just stay away and have him yell. He's such a throwback quarterback to me, such like an early 2000s quarterback where that worked really well then. I just haven't seen it enough recently, and I'm just like, I'm not going to be the one who tries to buck that trend.
Yeah. Especially for how Dable calls an offense, I feel.
Yeah.
It's even looking at what Daniel Jones, the liberty that he gives Daniel Jones to drop back and run. And the most efficient play in football is a quarterback scramble when a quarterback drops back to pass and then they run. I would, again, not to say that Penix can't do it. It's just that it's not the strong element of his game. So again, fit with the Giants. Fit with the Giants. It's not necessarily this guy's a bad quarterback. It's just, we're talking about he's a Giant, fit with the Giants.
Yeah. I don't really care to go over too many other quarterbacks because I guess the three of us are on the same page because we're like, if we're not going to get a first round quarterback, then whatever, that's how I'm looking at it. But we're taking up a ton of your time, but if you're having fun, we can keep going. There's a couple let's do this. Tackles. We were starting to talk about tackles. The Giants, I heard they met twice with Roger Rosengarten from Washington. I don't know if you got to watch any of the tackles, or anybody stand out to you that you thought was in range, but Rosengarten was the right tackle at he was actually the blindside tackle for Michael Penix at Washington. Good pass blocker. Usually not the best run blocker. If you remember the national title game, he had his lunch eaten by that Michigan blitz. I mean, that Zach Minter that was calling over. I mean, that Jesse Minter was calling, and just getting beat one-on-one by Dylan Harrell, the edge rusher for Michigan, just getting slaughtered. So I heard the Giants were interested in him. I wouldn't mind it because I think this guy's like a late day 3 kind of a flyer at a swing tackle. Maybe you can get a starting right tackle if he gets good coaching out of him kind of person. But I don't know if any of the tackles stood out to you that you met or that you watched and thought, oh, that's interesting. That guy might be good.
I got to go back and I got to watch that guy from Washington in his 1v1 reps, especially knowing that the Giants kind of met with him, and it was reported that they met with him. But Christian Jones out of Texas, that's obviously it's a much bigger name. He I think was just the cleanest and the best tackle all week. Patrick Paul from Houston, he's an underrated guy that I think not a lot of people have been talking about, but I saw him flash a little inconsistent. But again, if you're inconsistent, odds are maybe you're a day 2, day 3 guy, and that's where maybe we're going to be looking to grab a tackle. Kingsley, all right, hear me out with this. BYU offensive tackle.
Yeah, go ahead. Let me see if we can do it.
There was also like 3 Kingsleys at the Senior Bowl, and it was very confusing.
I know what you're talking about.
And two of them were like on the front 7, and there was like one on offense, one on defense. Kingsley Suamatia. That's not it.
Correct.
It is correct.
Yeah.
Right.
Suamatia. Yeah. Yep.
BYU for offensive tackle. I thought he was pretty solid. He was pretty good in his 1v1 reps. Can I tell you about the story of a little old boy named Dominic Pooney from Kansas?
Yes.
I'm going to tell you the story of a little old boy, Dominic Pooney from Kansas. One of the worst day ones I've ever seen from somebody at the Senior Bowl, an O-line, D-line 1v1. He was at tackle mainly, a little bit at guard, mostly at tackle. 2023, he was also playing tackle for the University of Kansas. He moves to center and guard, day 2 and day 3 mostly. 2022, and I guess, wherever he was, Kansas or, wherever he was playing, before 2023, he was playing in the interior.
Mm-hmm.
Dominic Pooney was good. He was like really good. He didn't look like a great athlete. He didn't look like he was tremendously strong, but he's got size, and he was, especially when he moved to center, I'm like, who the hell is this guy? I haven't recognized this guy snapping the ball from day 1. Find it to be very funny that Dominic Pooney, who has the last name of P-U-N-I, so it should be Pooney, like puny, like a puny man. The story of Dominic Pooney is one that I learned to fall in love with in Mobile because, it's one of those things, if it's not how you start, it's how you finish, and the little engine that could, and all those things too. So that's an underrated guy that I definitely don't think is going to be drafted high. But if you want a day 3 guy to root for to go somewhere, Pooney, I almost called him Puny. Pooney it is.
Pooney is a guy that our friend Don had told me about a couple of months ago. He kept bugging me. He's like, "Have you looked at Pooney? Have you looked at Pooney?" I'm like, "No, I haven't looked at Pooney yet." And then last week he was like, "I told you to freaking look at Pooney," because he was doing well. And he's right. Like, the guy's got really. I mean, he played at left guard in 2020. We had like 848 reps at left guard last year, and he had 728 left tackle. So I don't know. I guess you're saying he looked better on the interior. That doesn't surprise 100%. Me. Okay, 100%. so he's probably an interior lineman, but maybe he has versatility. Maybe he can play some tackle in the NFL with some coaching. Who knows? This is the kind of guy we should be looking at. Monty, did you see his grades from PFF? They're ridiculous. So he had a 90.5 pass blocking grade this year. He had a 72.5 run blocking grade. His true pass set grade was 86.6. Now I know everybody doesn't love PFF. I'll say this. The good thing about PFF is they're getting better as they accumulate more data. They're a database center, so the sample size is perfect. We like to look at it from year to year to year, just to get a feel for how guys perform. He was a 68.6 in 2022. He's an 80.6 at tackle this year, and his pass blocking was insane. So if you're saying this guy looked good on the interior, and he's improving as a pass blocker wherever he's playing, that's an intriguing name. That's something let me see where they have him graded. They actually have him in the top 70. They have him 68th overall. So,
what?
Yeah.
I mean, here's the thing. He did look good. He looked good when he moved to the interior. And I was that stood out, but he was really, I was like, day 1, I'm like, all right, goodbye. Like he was a D lineman highlight reel. Like, usually the guys that are you have to take note of the Senior Bowl, the guys that are good, but then also the guys that are D lineman or O lineman highlight reels, because those are the guys that, if guys have good plays against, it's like, all right, maybe I have to dismiss this a little bit because this guy may not be that good.
Yeah. I mean, I like Patrick Paul. We reviewed him earlier in the year. The problem with Patrick Paul is he's kind of a very lean, long guy, and we thought, like, there's no way this guy will ever play in the interior. And I mean, not that you want him to, but you kind of
he was out there at tackle at the Senior Bowl.
Yeah, and we're like, I don't think he has any versatility to play guard in the NFL. So if he misses a tackle, it's over for him. That's kind of our concern, because he's very light for his frame. But I don't think he's great. But we'll see. I mean, he's probably going to go early day 2 also.
Hand up on Patrick Paul that I'm trying everything in my mind to get by. Is I just remember Josh Jones out of Houston being that like pass blocking tackle. He was supposed to go like first round, and all of a sudden he fell to round trying so hard not to think about him.
He does have one thing that we do like. He has NFL bloodlines. His brother is Chris Paul, the guard from the Commanders.
Yeah.
And when I told Monty that, he's like, Chris Paul's been playing basketball for like 30 years. I'm like, not that guy. I'm like, oh, not that Chris Paul. Chris Paul, the guard from the Commanders. So he does have NFL bloodlines. I don't know. Is it like we've gone through so many guys? Is there anybody that you saw that just stood out? Just shoot from the hip that you wanted to talk about.
Any position?
Any position.
Yeah.
Oh God, I mean, we haven't talked receivers yet, and the receivers are always like, that's like the funnest position to talk about in the draft. All right, can I just rip off some names for wide receiver, and then then I'm gonna rip them off, and then you let me know where you want to go.
Okay.
Devontae Walker, UNC. That's a conversation. Like that's not like this guy stood out in a great way. That is a conversation that we can have if you want. Roman Wilson from Michigan, stud. I think we already know this. Ricky Pearsall from Florida, stud. Also a good dude. We interviewed him. He was the first interview that we had. We can even talk about that. Javon Baker, UCF. I already gave a Baker UCF, but we did interview him, and he was funny, but also like I'll say he was Kadarius Tony funny, but do you want that on your football team? Brendan Rice, very physical player. I mean, obviously, Jerry Rice's son. Now we're going to move to the American team. Jamari Thrash, Louisville. A guy that stood out. I had no notes on him heading into the week, and he's a guy that stood out. Jaquan Jackson, Tulane. Guy that's small, but here's my main observation on Jaquan Jackson out of Tulane. Small, slot wide receiver, probably. When I was filming wide receiver DBs 1v1s, you have to move the camera because if guys are fast, then you have to follow them. He was the rep that I had to move the fastest for all week. Where I was like, oh my God, I'm flying. I'm thinking of this as I'm following the ball and as I'm following him. I'm thinking, oh my God, I'm really going fast right now. That was my thought. I'm like, who caught that ball? Oh, Jaquan Jackson. I'll write him down. Johnny Wilson out of FSU. I believe this is the guy that's big and slow, and I kind of compared to who's that guy from Stanford? Xavier Huggins?
Elijah Higgins.
Elijah
Higgins from last year.
I just got confused with Xavier Leggett and Elijah Higgins. So Johnny Wilson, FSU, wide receiver, big, slow. This may be a bad comparison, but I did compare him to Elijah Higgins on like the first Senior Bowl recap show. And then lo and behold, I think they might have started to try him at a tight end. I can't remember
them, though, but
I can't remember, but he's big and slow, and I don't. Again, Elijah Higgins is my comparison. Xavier Leggett from South Carolina, a guy that had big expectations coming into the week. I think he kind of fell short of them. It was a Rashee Rice type of week where I feel like a guy that had very high expectations to dominate didn't dominate, but still had a decent week. I actually do think that Rashee Rice had a better week than Xavier Leggett. And that was a guy, Rashee Rice was obviously a guy last year that was talked about how he had like a disappointing week. So, especially if we're talking about, again, he's a Giant. I don't know if Xavier Leggett fits the Giants' skill sets of speed, separation. I think he is an explosive player, but again, I don't know what the speed is going to really look like. And then the final player I have is Ladd McConkey out of Georgia. He was fun, and we had reporters behind us from like Georgia, and they were doing TV stuff, and the guy was saying, "Oh, Ladd McConkey, there are people down here in Mobile saying that he reminds me of Cooper Kupp. You know that guy?" Oh, and
he's going to get Cooper Kupp comps all the way to the draft.
But Ladd McConkey did have a really good week. So.
He's a big shifty white guy in the slot, so he's going to be Cooper Kupp. He's very good. He's a really outstanding player. Let's start with Tez Walker because I love Tez Walker.
I want to talk Tez Walker.
And let's hear your thoughts about Tez.
My main question with Tez Walker is I wanted him to prove in Mobile that kind of a little bit of the Jalen Hyatt effect. I wanted to prove that he can run routes because I think that UNC offense is very vertical based. I think his average up to target was super high. And I think he proved that at the release, he's pretty solid. There were some DBs that tried to get hands on him, and he did a nice job of swiping those away and getting separation right at the stem. I actually made Tez Walker was one of the first shorts that I made of that week of a voiceover. Oh, look at these two plays and look at how good they are. I don't know if I walked away from the Senior Bowl being like, yeah, I'm sold that this guy can run like NFL routes and get NFL separation. I know he has the explosivity. I know he has the athleticism. But it's the route running and kind of like the little refinements of his game that I still have some questions about. So you love him.
Well, I do. I think he was underutilized. I don't think Mac Brown calls the most dynamic offense. I think he just happens to have good quarterback play. I think Tez Walker is a very good route runner when he's asked to do certain routes, like kind of like Jalen Hyatt. You're not going to ask him to run the full route tree. I would agree. Like I don't think he does that, not fully yet, at least. But what he does very well is he stretches the field. He runs good posts and vertical routes. He gets separation, at least on game film he does. And he does not decelerate when he goes into his break, which is something we looked at a lot. Like some of these guys, like as soon as they break, they slow down, and whatever separation they got, they lose. He doesn't lose it. Like when he gets it, he's very smooth and just powers right through those breaks. So I liked him a lot. He's getting a lot of first round love. I mean, for like legit first, early second round love. So, I mean, I think people are beginning to catch on. I thought he was going to be a little bit of a sleeper for us, but I don't think he's going to last. So it's interesting to hear you guys didn't hear too much. You didn't see too much that you loved from him. So
no, don't get me wrong. I saw a lot that I liked. And again, I really think a lot of these receivers like didn't benefit from the fact that the coaching staffs on both teams, you didn't have like the wow plays of, oh, this guy going deep and beating double coverage. I mean, even Payne Durham had like a highlight worthy play where between a safety and a corner or whatever, a linebacker and a safety, he makes this catch in the end zone and his helmet comes flying off and he does a spike. And it's like, holy shit. And that's Payne Durham, the slowest guy in the freaking class last year out of tight end. Out of Purdue. So you didn't really have that. You didn't really have like the wow team plays of guys like really going and like utilizing what they can do. And I think I know Tez Walker has it. So that's why I was very intrigued by him heading into the week. And really, I think the main thing is that he did not show me that he couldn't do it. And I think that's my main takeaway from Tez Walker.
He had some drop issues as well too, right?
Yes. And I think that's what I ignore out of my brain because I want to like him. But you are right, and I'm glad you brought that up
But he only dropped like 6% of his passes this year in games.
Yeah,
so
it wasn't
like the yips or something at the Senior Bowl. More, yeah. It wasn't on his film. Xavier, so his yard for route run, to be fair to you, only 2.28. Like we kind of look at that as like that's a gauge, at least from fantasy purposes, how these guys are going to do. 2.28 is not. It's okay. It's not amazing. Like, but Xavier gets over 3.
I know.
And he's like 3-1 or something like that, if I recall. The problem with Leggett is, he didn't do anything until this year, until his 5th year.
Yes.
He had 0 production until this year. And then he blew up this year, like insanely blew up. And so, you always have to be wary of guys like that. Like, are they just staying in college too long? Is that the issue? So I do think the Senior Bowl was going to affect his stock one way or another. Part of me is cynically happy that he didn't have a great week because I actually do think he could be a good player in the NFL. If the Giants wanted to take him to make him their X receiver and say, hey, look, we don't have a real X, we'll take you in the 2nd round somewhere, I wouldn't be upset about that.
I also hated that Xavier Leggett ended up coming in 2 inches shorter than he reported. That stunk because he's a big guy who plays big. And like, I don't know, for me, I know like, oh, it's no big deal. He still plays big, but I'm like, yeah, but like it's a difference when you have like a 3-inch advantage over these corners than having a 1-inch advantage over these corners. Like it's small, but I don't know. You're not going to get the DK Metcalf comps as much anymore.
Right. And I asked Bobby and Grump in one of the recap shows because I didn't know a ton about Leggett. So I asked them, because they were talking about him all week. And, this is clearly a guy that was hyped up coming in. And I was like, okay, so the one thing I want to know is what is his trump card? What is the thing that he does best? Because we're talking about how he's disappointed and we're talking about, some things that he could do well, could do better, what he is doing in the Senior Bowl. What is his trump card? And they said, like, I think they came down to like, oh, he makes spectacular catches. That now I said, okay, does that mean he's a contested catch wide receiver? They said no, but he just makes like spectacular catches. And when I heard that, I kind of I removed myself a little bit. Is that fair, accurate? I see we're making faces.
he does make contested catches. I wouldn't say he's about 50%, which is kind of where you want to be. Mm-hmm. He's right in that territory. So I don't think he's like bad at it. He's a good hands catcher on film. I mean, he plucks the ball out of the air. I think that's something. And I know people made a big deal because his hand size came in smaller than they liked also. And they were like, well, how does he do this? But he does. He plucks the ball out of the air. So I think there's enough concerning features here where I think his stock is going to actually fall. Like I think he's going to keep tumbling now, and he may find himself in the third round even. So we'll see. But I wouldn't be opposed to taking a flyer on a guy like him. I really wouldn't. Like, I think we could use an X receiver.
Yeah, he's a good athlete too.
Let me jump to. I mean, so just quickly, Roman Wilson's a guy we both liked. We both became biased Michigan fans throughout the course of the year as we did our week-to-week reviews, because every week there were Michigan stars. Like, we're like, how good are these guys? Like, we're like every week, no matter what position group there were like these great Michigan players, well coached.
They're all well coached.
And they're all well coached. These guys are playing so well, and we're like, I remember like by week 5, I was like, Monty and I were talking. I'm like, they're gonna win the Natty. Like they're gonna roll over people and win the Natty, and they did. So we knew Roman Wilson was good. Yeah.
By the way, 6 players on the national team that were 6 Michigan players at the Senior Bowl on the national team. 6. Yeah. And the Senior Bowl are guys. I would say Roman Wilson's the best guy. Senior Bowl is guys that are just like you kind of are there because you need to be there.
Yeah.
6.
And they just played.
Yeah.
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 They're impressive.
There's more in this draft class.
I think Wilson did a lot to help his stock. I think that's been well documented.
And he's going to blow up the combine.
Absolutely. He is. He's a freak.
The only player to beat Quinyon Mitchell all week was Roman Wilson.
Didn't Quinyon Mitchell call him out and say, "I want you"? Well, when they let him pick somebody?
It was what was great is I think this was day 2, and yeah, because day 3 they just screwed around, which was frustrating. Day 2, the end of practice. I'm not on the field, so especially I'm all the way up high because I'm trying to film everything. So they went up against each other like 3 times, and it was 1v1. It's clear by day 2 these are the two best football players on the field, and the coaches gave probably what the players wanted, what the teammates wanted, what they wanted, and then what all the fans and spectators wanted. We're gonna have best player on offense go up against the best player on defense. Quinyon Mitchell got him a few times, and I will say the only reason Roman Wilson did win, like he won, he had that one-handed catch on the sideline. It was like an out route going towards the sideline. He won because Quinyon Mitchell tripped. But you know what? It's still a win.
And it was an incredible catch.
And it was an incredible catch.
He's very fast. He's very, very fast.
So good at the release too.
Yeah, he separates. He's fast. He's strong. He's a hell of a blocker. They probably didn't get to show that, but you watch him on tape. This guy blocks like a demon in space. He's a good football player.
Which is
he reminds me a little bit of a juiced up Jep.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we even commented on that a little bit. So those guys are good. Pearsall's good. Let's talk about Jamari Thrash. This is a guy, like, I like Jamari Thrash. When you watch him on his tape, like, well, why don't you give me your thoughts? You watched him, right? What did you think about him?
I don't have a ton he got open. I mean, that was the biggest thing of the week is just, again, glancing over to wide receiver DBs, especially if O-line, D-line's happening. Who's that guy that caught that? Oh, guy with the red helmet? Thrash. And it was similar to him and Jaquan Jackson. By the time day 2 and day 3 rolled around, it's who are the guys that's nobody's talking about that's having a really good week? And Jamari Thrash was one of those guys that, nobody's talking about it heading in, but leaving it, guys are we're all talking about him.
It sounds a lot like our notes that have it in front of us. It's just like lots of separation. Go get balls. Skinny frame. Doesn't flash anything. He's not flashy, but he gets open.
He's solid after the catch, smooth route runner.
Yep.
Nothing flashy, but he was always open. Like, you watch his game tape. He was always open. You're like, he doesn't even look that fast on tape, but he's just always open. And so, yeah, I liked him a lot. Let me see. I'll give you a name, and this is not a guy from a Senior Bowl, but if you want a couple of names to look at that were at the Shrine Bowl, one wide receiver and one lineman. So a wide receiver, I want you to look at. I told this guy about him months ago. He doesn't listen.
I know where you're going.
Yeah. Malik Washington. Malik Washington, wide receiver from UVA. So this kid was at the Shrine Bowl, and I was telling him I just looked it up. I live in the the DC area, so I watch UVA games. I want my kids to go to UVA, so I'm trying to brainwash my house. So in any case, this kid pops like he's small. He's Wandale Robinson size. He's small. He's not big, but he's stout. He looks like he's bigger than Wandale. He's about 5'8", but he's like a stronger kid. When you watch him, he is an absolute monster. Like he's uncoverable. Kind of like he's got a lot of Zay Flowers vibes, the way he plays football. And he's strong. Like he runs people over and he runs great routes. So I started looking up his stats and I was shocked. Absolutely shocked at this kid's stats. He was at 3 points, some huge number in his yards per route run. His grades are crazy off the chart. Then you watch his film and you're like, wow, he knocks people around. It's not easy to find his film. You got to go ACC stuff, but he blew up the Shrine Bowl, and he was coached by Mike Kafka, if I recall. So, somebody to watch. We already have Wandale, but as far as I'm, day 3 guy, if he's there, just another guy that just a good football player. So that's someone you should look at. And then you probably have heard of this guy, the lineman who I don't know why he went to the Shrine Bowl, but Christian Mahogany from Boston College. Have you heard of him?
Yes. Yeah, he went to the
Shrine
Bowl.
He was
I don't know what
mock draft.
He was, I think, yes. Very good lineman. I'm not sure why he went to the Shrine Bowl. I really am not. He should have been at the Senior Bowl, but really solid. I think he's of the ilk of Christian Haynes. So those are 2 guys. And I guess the other one worth mentioning is Frank Gore Jr.
Frank Gore Jr.
He was definitely coached by Mike Kafka. He's obviously Frank Gore Sr.'s son. Really good running back. He played at Southern Mississippi. Yeah, I don't know why he went there, but he's really good. Really, really good. So just kind of guys you want to take a look at that are sleepers, day 3 kind of guy. Well, Mahogany's probably a day 2 guy, but just guys to look at and say, hey, if the Giants want to just add good players, like you were saying, we got to hit on the draft. We got to add difference makers in the draft.
Yeah.
You can't keep missing, and there are sleepers here. So that's worth mentioning, but that's good discussion. Did you see Malachi Corley, by the way?
Yeah. Is he, Western? He's a Western Kentucky vehicle.
Western Kentucky, yep.
Western Kentucky, yeah.
What did you think?
Very
of him?
Debo-like.
I didn't have but Debo was the phrase that I actually heard thrown around, and I always kind of, when I hear Debo, I love Debo Samuel, so I always kind of roll my eyes, especially Wandale Robinson could be like Debo Samuel. It's like
you hear it every year. Stop.
Not even Debo Samuel wants to be like Debo Samuel because he hated that role that one year. I didn't hear much. I didn't see much, but that doesn't mean that he didn't have a good week. I mean, here's the thing with receivers, man. Receivers, and this is why it's the most fun position to look at every year in the draft. It's because these guys are good, because they come from advanced offenses in college, and it's because they're all athletic freaks, and they can all run. And even if you can't run, then they're strong and they can go up and they can high point a football and catch it. And you could say that maybe the possession, jump ball 50-50 receivers kind of dying in the NFL. But I think that depends on the coach that you have. You see George Pickens is still doing, is kind of keeping that alive there in Pittsburgh. So all these receivers are so fun, like all of them.
So what the one thing I'll say, Justin, when you go look at Malachi Corley, go look at his 2022 tape, because he was much more of an aggressive looking runner in that.
Mm-hmm.
It's fun. It's some fun stuff. Even if you just look up the highlights from it, it's fun. He was really fun that age. That's where he looked most like Debo, because he just ran fucking through people.
That's awesome.
But all right, so we spent a lot of time. We're getting late. Do you want to just throw out any running back names and we'll try to get out of here?
Now, running back was a position that's tough for me to watch. It was the 2 guys, the one kid from USC and the New Hampshire. He caught a bunch of balls.
Dylan Lobby. I saw he was killing people as a receiving back.
Yeah. So those are the 2 guys, and I kind of every year I choose my battles, because number one, I recognize that I'm not at this is why I think I'm honored, and I also think it's crazy that you had me on as the first guest, because I definitely do not consider myself an NFL draft junkie. So when I'm at the Senior Bowl, I very much divide and conquer. It's like I want to know the guys that I know, and I kind of want to. This was the first year where I really wanted the Senior Bowl to kind of come to me, where the guys that stood out, I was like, hey, this guy had a good week. I'll continue to look more into him. I didn't want to be like, have like all these write-ups of, 70, 80 players that were heading into the week and be like, all right, I know every single one of them. No, I kind of want to let the week kind of come to me. If Isaiah Adams has a great week, great. I'm glad to see that he's already projected as like a day 2 guy. Christian Haynes, oh, cool. He had a great week. Well, everybody's now talking about him. So then it's good to look into him. So this was the first year where I really let the Senior Bowl come to me, and I actually enjoyed it a lot more, being like genuinely surprised by, oh, look at that guy. Look at that guy. Look at that guy. And I know it's not the kosher way to go about things. It's maybe not like the NFL analyst way to go about things, but I don't really hold myself to that standard.
Yeah.
So
Go have fun. The Senior Bowl is always frustrating to me because it's like, if you watch college football all year and you watch these kids, I hate seeing kids get pushed down because the Senior Bowl is such an unnatural environment. Like, I like seeing kids getting pushed up. I like seeing kids who maybe didn't get a chance to show out, and then they go with these one-on-one reps against like big Power 5 guys, and they show out, and you're like, all right, that's a player. But I like the Rashee Rice thing is a good example, right? He was good all year. His tape was great. He just was very average at the Senior Bowl. And people were like, oh, we can't separate. It's going to be a problem. And look at him in the NFL, right? He's the player he was at, where do you go? Southern Methodist or whatever. So I kind of like take it with a grain of salt, but I do like hearing about like the sleeper guys who are rising, who make a name for themselves. I think you're doing a good. Good.
Or a guy like Quinion Mitchell, who really needed to go up against big talent, and he showed it.
Dude, I've never been more sold to that. Like a guy, let's just say a guy at the Senior Bowl. Like a guy at the Senior Bowl is going to be a good NFL player. I've never been more like my heart will be broken if he's like not a good football player. I mean, injuries could always happen, and that's the thing that holds people back. But like my heart will legitimately be broken if he's just like, okay, completely healthy player, and he's not a good NFL player just because he falls under all those prerequisites that you want, and he just dominated all week. Can I tell you one guy that was, and this is again like this is nothing against anybody. He was the worst player that I've ever seen at the Senior Bowl. And I've been going like I think the last 2 or 3 years. Tanner Bortolini out of Wisconsin, and I think it's just very hilarious. He's an offensive lineman, interior guy, and I just think it's very hilarious that he has the last name Bortolini. And he was that bad. Like when I look, all right, D line highlight reel, Dwayne Carter from Duke kicking ass, and I'm like, oh great, all right. So Dwayne Carter, write his name down. Gabe Hall from Baylor. Oh, he had that great swim move. Okay, write that name down. And then I look back, and all the defensive guys that impressed me from day one, they're going up against Tanner Bortolini from Wisconsin, and I'm like, what the hell?
Poor Tanner Bortolini.
So yeah, so speaking of tearing guys down, I guess we'll end this with tearing down Tanner Bortolini.
Well, here's a tidbit about that. Did he look poorly coached to you when you saw him? I'm curious.
Yeah, I mean he just leaning and really.
So
bad.
do you know who his online coach was?
Oh no,
you probably don't.
Don't tell me he's Giants tied somehow.
He's tied to our players. His online coach is Jack Bicknell Jr. You know where he was online coach 2 years ago in 2022?
Where?
University of North Carolina.
Oh, joy.
So Bicknell Jr. is tied to Dable. I looked it up when they drafted Josh Azudu, way overdrafted him. And then they took Marcus McKeithen for God knows what reason. And of course, we were all excited about Josh. We're like, hey, they must have a plan, right? And then they're just terrible. We're like, no, they don't have a plan. So I looked it up. Bicknell Jr. was O-line coach when Dable was offensive coordinator in Kansas City, I think back in 2014, whatever the year was. So they had ties. So I'm assuming that there were some ties with him and Bobby Johnson, and they were like leaning on guys they knew. And I'm like, why are they drafting North? Like, that was a bad O-line. That like the Sam Hartman got killed that year. Like maybe they see something. But Bicknell Jr. went to Wisconsin, and Wisconsin, which traditionally has great lines, their line was so atrocious this year, they fired him just like a month ago. They reassigned him and hired somebody else.
That does not surprise me.
And that's the tree we plucked from when we took Josh Azudu and Marcus.
Oh, terrific. You know what? There's 50 minutes left in the day that is February 7th. I know we don't usually like to film. We don't like to date ourselves in podcasting, but there's 50 minutes left in the day that is February 7th. You just ruined the rest of the day.
At least it's less than an hour. But that's what we do here. We dig up the most useless information to ruin people's day. But as soon as you said the Wisconsin O-line guy, and I was like, oh, I know Jack Bicknell coached this guy, and that's why I asked, was he literally poorly coached?
It always ties back to the Giants somehow, huh?
It's always a Giant thing. It's a Jack Bicknell Jr. Giant scout.
Giants 2022 draft scout, because Joe Shane didn't trust anybody in the freaking building because he had to go off of his own notes and observations for the first 4 rounds of the draft, and then the rest of it was whatever.
He's like,
whatever.
Hey Bobby,
if you're a top 40 visit, you'll just. I mean, this is what they do every year. If you're a top 40 visitor, you're a Giant. I am this year. I said this last year, but I'm doing this again this year. If the Giants have a top 40 visit with somebody, I think I should have at least 3 pages of notes for each player they have a top 40 visit with. That's
fair.
Because odds are, guess what? He's a Giant. Like, this podcast should solely be based on who the Giants have top 40 visits with.
It's going to be
they'll ruin it. As soon as you do it, they'll just stop using top 40 visits.
So I told Monty, like, we put in, like, we're going to put in 6 months of work of evaluating. By the time we're done, like, well over 100, probably close to 150 prospects. We'll like have notes. We'll have a big board, a vertical board, a horizontal. We'll have everything set up. And then the Giants are just going to take whoever the fuck they want at whatever fuck pick. And we're going to be like, who? And we're going to get DMs like, who is this guy? Who is this guy? And I'll have no idea who that person is. And it's going to be frustrating.
It'll get to, like, the first round, you're going to be good, right? I think all of us will be good. First round, all of us are going to be good. It'll get to, like, the end of the second round, and it'll start. It'll start to be like, who? And the 2022 draft, because of how COVID screwed everything up, did you see, like, that was the first year that Bobby was like, I am going to know everybody. Everybody. Did you see we were on stream? Bobby had a public meltdown because he didn't know who Cordell Flott was.
Yeah.
Because number one, we barely had any notes on Wan'Dale Robinson. The only note that I had on Wan'Dale Robinson is who's the former Notre Dame coach? Charlie who?
O'Brien.
Weiss.
Charlie Weiss.
Weiss. So Charlie Weiss went on, the big tub of blue of a man, went on Sirius XM radio and said, Wan'Dale Robinson reminds me of Dave Maggette. I'm like, okay, cool. I was listening to Sirius XM radio that day. So I'm like, okay, Giant note, put that in my head. And then lo and behold, with the second pick of the draft, Giants draft Wan'Dale Robinson. And we're like, who the fuck is this guy?
I like Wan'Dale, but I know.
Like, Charlie Weiss said he reminded him of Dave Maggette from the 80s. And then the third round comes. We take
that was horrible. Josh Azudu first. Yeah.
Josh Azudu first. Well, at least Bobby knew who that was, because Bobby.
We had a top 30 visit with him
Azudu the day of day 2. He just looked at him like that day. And then they took Flott because he was, super young, and we were looking at all these older guys because, they have, look at this guy with a lot of games, a lot of stats and mocks and, the rankings and whatever. So they take this Cordell Flott guy, and he loses his mind. He's like, I put in all this work. I do all this.
I remember
and all of you are watching to know who is this guy, and I don't know who he is. And that's just he was bashing that coconut, and it was one of the best displays of emotion I've ever seen somebody had publicly, of like what he was feeling internally, just melted it on screen.
They're going to do it to us again. They are 100% going to do it to us again on day 2 and day 3. I'm so sure of this. That's why I'm like, just give me a quarterback in round 1 so I can be at peace for day 2 and day 3. Like, please. That's where I am.
Nobody will care about the rest of the draft.
No, if they get up there and they're like, whatever, J.J. McCarthy at 6, like, some people will hate it, but the majority of the Giants fans will just breathe a sigh of relief and say, okay, we're good.
And now nobody will care about the rest of the draft.
No, the whole discussion for the next 3 months will be, when will J.J. McCarthy take over for Daniel Jones? That'll be the discussion for the next maybe 6 months, whatever. But it's going to be. But if he doesn't do that, if we truly just go BPA, he is going to piss us the hell off by the end of day 2, like guaranteed, guaranteed. All right, before we close, like, we're going like 2 hours strong. I'm loving it. I appreciate your time. I know we both do. You want to close out with any Giant related tidbits or anything you want to go through before we shut this down?
No, I mean that was basically it. The tidbits that we kind of heard at the Senior Bowl, I kind of gave both, and the other tidbit, a lot of I actually lost a tidbit person when Wink Martindale left, so that kind of sucks for me. And my belief and want for the Giants to trade up, I think is also shared by the Giants front office. But as we talked about, it takes two to tango, and that's that. I mean, I'm not really a tidbit person, but you know what? I'm not. You know what? I'm not gonna not say that because us at what we do over at TG, whatever. Danny King even breaking news a little bit more than some of the beat people. So I'm not gonna shy away from knowing a little bit. So yeah, but no, fellas, thank you for having me on. This was a lot of fun. I'm very proud of myself that I did a lot better than I thought I was going to do. Because again, I don't consider myself a draft person. I don't really consider myself like a football dude. The more that I'm doing this, and I think I'm going to kind of lean into that. So I have a lot of fun. I like the Giants. I like the game of football. I'll talk about it. Do you know my Cold Stone Creamery of grading draft prospects? And I write this down on every draft player that I do.
What?
Like it. I mean, this is the Cold Stone Creamery sizes. Like it, love it, gotta have it. I don't grade players by round. I don't grade players by a letter grade. I grade them with like it, love it, gotta have it.
Hey, that's whatever works.
I mean, that's probably as good as 72, 65. It's kind of the same thing.
What is the difference between me giving somebody a 71 or a 72?
Right. So nothing. All right. Well, we appreciate it. So Justin, you're our first guest, as we said. We appreciate all the time you gave us. Hopefully, we'll have you back sometime. We'll as the draft comes up, maybe more or whatever as the season goes on. We just started this having fun, so we'll see what kind of stuff we go into. But I'm sure everybody knows you. But why don't you tell people your handle and about Talking Giants, and we'll just start with that as we close out.
Yeah, Justin Penik, Penik. I asked Michael Penix if he thinks that we were related, and he said, "I don't know, maybe." Which was an insane question.
Yeah.
I said, "You could be honest and say no." He's like, "I don't know, maybe." And he put on that smile, that damn smile. 13 Reasons.
I love that clip.
That smile, that damn smile. Yeah, so Justin Penik, Talking Giants. The bigger thing is, if you're still listening at this point, JM Football, John Boy Media Football, but it's JM Football on YouTube. That's like the main thing that I'm tackling right now, and trying to really grow that. And that's the thing that the company wants, and to really grow our football coverage and to get that YouTube page and to get that brand up. So if you enjoy what I'm doing with the Giants and you want to, it's a little bit more personality stuff. It's a lot more NFL stuff, NFL-based stuff too. We do a lot of trivia videos on there. That's the thing that's doing the best right now. So JM Football, want to check that out? Check it out. And fellas, I appreciate you having me on.
We'll put the Twitter handle for that, if you don't mind, on when we post this.
I would love that.
Yeah, let's do that. Is it JM Football? Is it JM Football Tips? What's the handle?
I'm going to check right now. It's at John Boy Media FB.
Okay.
We'll put it in the description. We'll put it in the tweet and all.
It's on your. No, we'll put it in. Justin, we really appreciate your time. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. Hope you stayed for the whole 2 hours. If you don't, we don't care, because you don't hear this. But no, we will be back next week doing another live show. We'll get you guys some more details on that. Follow us at He's a Giant Pod. Follow Monty at Monte Cristo at MONTECRI 5TO. Follow me at Queens_guy. Like us, subscribe. We're on everything, YouTube, whatever. You guys know by now. Thank you guys, and we will see you next week. Go Giants.
Go Giants.